It's a go. I think so.
Boy, the chat is already going. Hey, you want to know what's dumb?
What's dumb?
I got a dumb thing to talk about. And this is the niche, picky Jared thing. And here's what it is. Okay. I'm in this Facebook group where they pit different fictional characters against each other. It's just called like who would win, right? And their favorite two things to pit against each other are comic book characters and Dragon Ball characters. You know, like they'll be like, who would win, Goku or Superman? Who would win, Vegeta or Green Lantern?
I don't know
Flash
Goku
or
enough.
Gohan?
Who would win?
Here's the answer. It's always the superheroes. Always. Literally always. And here's why. Because those comics have been going on so long that there's always some stupid fucking powerful version of that character that is just utterly retarded. Like they were asking about Hulk versus Toppo, who's a character in Dragon Ball. And like if you go to movie Hulk, the Dragon Ball guy definitely wins. Like just
I've actually seen that there's like weird extended Hulk versions that are
I said
like
that
world size.
They asked like who would win, Hulk or Toppo, and I was like, it's definitely a Hulk because like I haven't read the comics, but I know there's probably a version of the Hulk that that barehanded like closed in a black hole or some shit, some stupid retarded shit like that. And this dude was like,
He like
yeah, man, you're right,
or something like that. There's an Earth Eater that he beat, and
well, they're like, yeah, man, you're right. There's actually a version of the Hulk that literally lifts the universe. I was like, I don't know how that's physically fucking possible, but that's fucking retarded. Comic books are stupid, man. That's anytime somebody tells me, I think I've ranted about this before, but anytime somebody pits anyone against the Flash always wins. Like you just think about it
even
for half
against
a second.
Hulk.
Oh, easy. Not even a, not even. Okay, so here's the deal. I think I might have had this rant on here before, but Flash and his most powerful Wally West Flash, he perceives time in attoseconds. And that's the time that it takes for a beam of light to get from one end of an atom to another. So, like, we watch those Flash.
Can't Superman do anything Flash can do?
No, he's not nearly as fast. He's very, very fast. But I'm like, he's way stronger than Flash. But here's the thing. If Flash could move like a million times faster than Superman could never hit him. And Flash could just pelt him with rocks or something until he died, which would take a while. But he can also do other things. He could like phase things out of material. He can phase a rock into Superman's head if he wants and then phase it back into reality. Like it's so dumb. Comics are fucking dumb. That's why anytime I watch a comic book movie, like everybody, the comic fans got really mad at the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man because he has the organic webbing that comes straight out of his wrists instead of creating the web shooters on his own. And I'm like, nah, it doesn't bother me. Like I hate comic booky things. I like superheroes. I do. I'm sick of them at this point, but I've always liked superheroes, but comic books are retarded. Like the Peter Parker basically becomes a literal rocket scientist. In the most recent game, they try to like show off his sciencey skills, and he's like, I need a drone for this. Luckily, I programmed my web shooters to have 3D printers in them, and then he just 3D prints a working motorized drone out of his fucking web shooter. It's retarded. Anyway, that's it. I've been holding that in.
It's retarded that the Flash always wins.
Well, yeah, no, Flash beats everyone. Like, and his own.
Wait, what about somebody with like super race power, or somebody with like I saw there was one that they were.
Was he gonna like microaggression him to death or something?
Like
it beats all things.
Can the Flash graduate from law school under systemic racism?
Can the Flash get into law school even with a perfect ACT? And
if you want to write the ultimate lame comic, just the Flash gets shot by a cop.
There's like I remember like watching So the Arrow came out and it was a big deal. It was a CW show. It was a little bit better than most shitty CW shows, but it's still just a shitty CW show. And then the Flash came out and there was a bunch of crossovers. And on the first crossover, it was like Flash versus Arrow. And I was like, hold on a sec. No, there's no fucking way this makes any sense. This dude, like, he's really, really good at shooting arrows. He can throw 3 tennis balls in the air, fire 3 arrows at once, and hit all 3 of them in different trajectories. Like, okay, it's a little outlandish, but like, I just saw this dude like run across town in the time that it took a bullet to leave a gun to be like an inch away from his girlfriend's face, and he just like grabs the bullet and moves it away. So like, I feel like there's a part in that crossover where like they're gonna fight, but then Arrow kind of tricks him. The Green Arrow tricks him, and he like triggers this trap that fires 2 crossbows at his calves, and they hit him. And I'm like, wait a minute, I just watched you. You're perceiving a bullet moving this slowly, and you just grab it and move it out of the way. If an arrow is coming at you, it's much more slowly. And even if you're not paying attention for the 3 hours in your perception that it takes to hit your face, it's going to go like ding. It's going to like boop right up against your face. And be like, oh, an arrow. That's funny. Get out of my way. Comics are fucking dumb.
Well, that's why, like, for a while I liked the Alan Moore comics, because it really wasn't about. I mean, they had to deal with it. They basically had the most powerful person of all time. Do people say
but that's part of the
Dr.
narrative.
Manhattan? Dr. Manhattan could do all the stuff that would beat anybody anytime too. I don't know how.
No, seriously, there's I thought the same thing, but then you get to certain versions of certain, like there's basically the One Above All, I think is his name in the Marvel comic, and it's essentially just God. Like it's like basically Christian God.
Yeah, no, there's like witch ladies who can like think anything into you, or you know, that sort of stuff.
I don't know,
but
retarded.
Anyway, in that show, everybody's all kind of super powered. Well, they're not really superheroes, but they are superheroes. You can say who could beat who, but it actually just becomes more of an argument for them of like, how do we do this? Is it deontology versus utilitarianism? You know, so it's not really. It becomes a clash.
That's the thing, is the
axioms.
Watchmen having Dr. Manhattan be stupid God levels of powerful. That's part of the narrative, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you start out with Green Lantern, right? And it is part of the narrative. It's like he has his ring, and his ring's abilities that he can make constructs, and it's directly tied to his willpower. So the stronger will he has, the stronger he is as a superhero. And I understand that. But then, like, just spurg dipshits start writing it and taking over. And then now all of a sudden he's actually the White Lantern now, and he's all of the Lantern rings combined. And now he's got 2 rings, and he can take one of them and grab a planet, and take another one and grab another planet and smash them together. And you're like, that's stupid. Like, you just ruined the whole narrative of your superpower thing.
I mean, I guess all that stuff's in the Marvel comics and all that sort of thing too. But at the same time, you know, Dr. Manhattan, the whole point of his thing is that if somebody gets that powerful, they start losing track of what humans even are and why they matter at all.
Yeah, no, that makes sense in the narrative. Yeah. Like, Dr. Manhattan doesn't go Super Saiyan or anything like that. Like, he doesn't get an upgrade to his powers. Partially because there's not really anything to upgrade. Like, how do you get better than that?
Well, if they made 10, you don't know how they got better than that? That's actually written. You know how he got better than that?
How's that?
Became a black woman.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't know that was the actual thing? That's actually true. I'm not even making that up. The HBO one, like, oh, he just went and saw, and he as amazing as he was, realized, wait a minute, this is a black woman who's a cop.
I thought he was
she's the most important thing on earth. And
I thought he was a black dude. Like, wasn't he played by a black
Manhattan?
Dude? Well, no, in the HBO series, isn't he played by a black guy? I watched
the whole thing. I just heard the stories of it, but no, it was a different black guy. Anyway,
maybe he passes his powers.
He passes on his powers to a black woman. Because she was the most amazing.
You inspire me, woman. How does anybody have the tenacity?
I don't care about any humans except for the most intersectional, which is.
I don't know how anybody has the tenacity to hurl a chair over the counter of a Waffle House.
But that actually kind of goes in line to explain the world to people through Alan Moore, because, you know, the first one's a whole question about axioms in morality, and it's should it be utilitarianism, or should it be deontology, or should it be, and then you get to the new current modern day morality, and it's identity. It's just identity. Identity makes you right. Your intersectionality and your oppression, and that's actually really gives you a view of how humanity's gone and made everything into identity politics, not an aberration, but the culmination of all of our laws.
Well, in his defense, Alan Moore always meant for it to be retarded. Because I thought everybody would just know that Rorschach is the bad guy. You did? The first scene Rorschach is in, he's like chopping up a pedophile, which maybe is a little brutal, but like bad guy.
Well, it just kind of goes to show, like in the most recent Ironheart stuff, the way that people with current day morality, right, they don't understand that they wrote a villain. They don't get that they made her a terrible person.
She is such an ass.
And I got to steal from this big corporation, and Tony, my mentor who gave everything to me, is a piece of crap. I don't need him no more.
Oh yeah, she's immediately like, you think Tony Stark would have had his stuff without billions of dollars? Well, I mean, first off, everybody plays that part where he goes, Tony Stark built this in a cave, but also, like, you were in Wakanda. And the GDP of Wakanda is, again, another stupid Marvel thing. Seriously, Black Panther's net worth, I think, is like $93 trillion, and that's him as an individual. So Wakanda's GDP has to be just absurd. And you're over there studying with magic science gurus.
And you have all the most important material in the universe, too.
And then you get millions of dollars in grant money from MIT, and you just keep blowing it up, and then you try to steal it. They won't let me have my suit. It's not yours. It's their money.
They don't understand. They have to write in that she's oppressed and write in that she's going against the corporations.
Except for they
Tony's the corporation, so she can't honor the old thing. She can't honor where she came from.
Yeah, except they lose their way, and it turns out she's not oppressed in any fucking way.
Imagine how much that's appeared in the world.
That's the most accurate. That's the most accurate story of Black oppression I've seen in a long time. It doesn't fucking exist.
Not currently.
What about redlining? Is it happening now? Was Ironheart redlined out of a nice neighborhood? No.
We got Skylar asking if we're going to go off on Candace Owens' conspiracy theory. I did listen to that earlier today. She thinks that the two guys are basically dudes who maybe got caught with child porn, and so they got forced into the thing by the Jews.
What a fucking clown. Oh, jeez.
The way you know that the Jews did it is because, did you see that Netanyahu denied it?
Oh, well, that clinches it.
Not once, but twice.
Yeah,
that's two focuses. That's two proofs. We've got two different sources of him denying.
I mean, that's like when Brett Kavanaugh cried. That clinched that one.
Did Candace go to fucking Kafka Law School University or some shit like that?
So I was listening to her whole thing, and I don't think, as I was talking about, that she's up in the night, that there's weird stuff about the current story. I think we're going to get into that. Actually, I mean, we've been dilly-dallying and delaying. I don't want to raise anybody's hopes because it might not happen, but it might happen. We have possibly, most likely, Jonathan Streeter coming on in just a little bit to talk about some of our wild times this past week of learning about the world as we go learning about it. And I put my name on this one because I'm putting my name on this one.
He only has to come on. He always comes on when I'm leaving early.
He's got to get Flip out of the way so Flip can't blame it on the Jews.
She'll get smarter.
I saw somebody saying this week, wokies to the left of me, groypers to the right. Here I am stuck in the middle with Jews.
I like it.
Pretty accurate.
Anyway, but Candace did point out, as many other people, I mean, not just her, but she's in a spurgy way, going through the complete little timeline of current events and what's out there and what isn't out there. Of course, with always like the face on of, well, this is obviously because the government's lying to us or something like that. But that there is like stuff in the story details that aren't perfectly lined up. But I think it's ridiculous. She's like, they're not telling us the whole story. They probably don't have the whole story yet, lady. Like, it takes a minute. It takes it. Like, if they're going to find every single camera, doorbell camera that caught the guy or something like that, or if they went and cased out the place 2.5 weeks ago, they don't get to snap their fingers. The reason why those text messages, as they are, we have them, is because they were part of charging documents. They were needed to charge the guy. And we just have those. It's highly unlikely that those are not highly. It's almost like 0% likely that those were fudged on what they read off of the cell phone. So if it was fudged, it was fudged whoever typed it into the cell phone. It wasn't fudged in that DA's office. And
do you want to know a funny thing that happened with the because I was talking at Morgan yesterday, and she was like, why? Yeah, those text messages did sound kind of weird. I was like, yeah, they did, I guess. Like, I don't say vehicle. I don't say my old man, but like, I know a lot of hunter boys that do. And so he could be a hunter boy. She's like, yeah, but why are they talking all Shakespearean? I was like, yeah, I guess they were saying like my love and shit like that, which is kind of, no, they were talking like Shakespeare. And then I realized that I sent a meme version of the transcript to her, and she thought it was real.
Oh, she thought that. She saw that, the one that was turned into Shakespeare.
She was confused.
Like, this sounds like how radical fags talk.
Yeah, she's like, and here's the opening. I'm not gonna read the whole thing because it's long, but this is from Robinson. I yet endure, my dearest heart, through fate, though fate ensnares me in the province of Orem a while longer. Soon, perchance, I shall return to thee, but first I must reclaim the sacred spear. I had yearned to bear this secret into my grave of venerable years, yet destiny compels me to unveil it. Forgive me.
Did that implicate destiny?
Oh my God. Thou wert not the hand that struck, surely. Alas, it was I. Forgive me, I beseech thee. But I thought the malefactor was seized. But I thought the malefactor was seized. Nay, they took some poor grey-bearded vagabond and pressed hard upon another clad in garments akin to my own. My design had been to seize my spear from its secret cache anon. But the watchman fastened shut half the city. All lies silent, save one lone chariot that lingers. For what cause? Why I wrought the deed? I. For his hatred had grown monstrous. Such venom may not be parleyed with. Had I but taken my spear unseen, no trace would remain. I strive now to reclaim it, praying the watch have departed. I have heard no heralds proclaim its discovery. How long didst thou weave this scheme?
I just imagine it somebody like randomly tuning into us in the
middle. Anyway, it goes on for a while, so it's probably all I need to read. But it's
well, I mean, I don't know if we wanted to go through like all the timelines and stuff. I don't know. I'm sure everybody who listens to us is extremely online, just like all of us. They probably know all the details, but it was a really wild week, just kind of slowly going through the process of the trickle of information coming out.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know, because I mean, we taught Marty about Rule 34, and we taught Steve about cucking. We're like Boomer Education Network.
Wait, we taught Marty about what?
Rule 34.
Oh,
I taught a lot of people about groypers this week, and that wasn't, and boy, was that the dumbest line ever that anybody took. Not anything in the world is still possible because we only know so much about the kids, but the evidence for that was crap. You started seeing it pop out and people saying it all over, like Mormon stories and ex-Mormon and all over the internet, of course.
Well, and Jimmy Kimmel.
Well, Jimmy Kimmel didn't say groyper. He said he was MAGA.
Yeah, that's even more retarded.
Because people need to remember as they go spreading this around, Nick Fuentes was anti-Donald Trump in this last election. He was not MAGA. He was explicitly
none of the white supremacists, like, because Richard Spencer voted for Joe Biden.
He lost all of them. You want to know why? Judy. They don't like that part. But I guess I don't know why they thought. Richard Spencer went for Biden, but I don't know. I don't even know who Fuentes. I think he just didn't vote or something like that. But the groper thing, like those gropers, I followed the gropers all along. And if you've been following Jordan Peterson all along, you might have come across the gropers and started saying, who the crap are these guys from like 5 years ago? Because they started showing up at Jordan Peterson's events. And Jordan Peterson would always have questions at the end of his events. And at that time frame, I was watching every single thing Jordan Peterson came out. And at his question session at the end, gropers would always get in there and try to ask him a question about like the Jewish question or the USS what is that? The USS Marshall? Liberty. I always say the wrong one, which is ostensibly a boat that the Jews attacked 50 years ago. And it's shady, but it's also, you know, I don't know what, like with that thing. So they're just always kind of bringing it up.
It doesn't make sense that they did it on purpose. And because the other thing is that that's not that crazy a thing. Like the Russians accidentally shot down a Korean airliner that strayed into Soviet airspace. The Americans accidentally shot down an Iranian airliner because they mistook it for a fighter jet. Like it's, you know, these mistakes have happened over time.
Yeah,
and like in active war zones, shit happens.
I listened to a guy who was there and survived it, one of the few survivors on the Tom Woods show, and he feels that there should have been no way they shouldn't have known because of the flags and stuff they had up. But I mean, that's about the argument.
They also claim that the choppers were unmarked or something like that. I don't know.
But anyway, I mean, Shapiro will wave that down by just saying it's a long time ago or whatever. But I mean, it is a long time ago. I mean, our regime isn't the same regime as what year was that? 80 something or whatever. But
I think it was 87.
Yeah. Anyway, not to go off on that whole thing. They'd always ask Peterson, or they'd get in line at any Ben Shapiro college thing. They'd get in line at any Michael Knowles college thing. They'd get in line at Matt Walsh. Dan Crenshaw famously like had a long battle back and forth with them. I sent you guys. You can go look up right now, like the Groypers versus Charlie Kirk, and somebody put together like an hour of Groypers getting a hold of microphones to ask Charlie Kirk questions. And it's always just one of those three things. And one of them is, would you debate Nick Fuentes? Which I guess at that time he was like 17 years old or something like that. Well,
they had a recent one too. Just from like a month or two ago, they had one. And I don't know, like they did like to call Charlie Kirk a coward for that. But at the same time, like if you could put together an hour compilation of these guys in like 10-second clips harassing him over this shit, I can see like being pretty short with them. Like, no, I fucking hate you.
Yeah, they just get frustrated with them and say, shut up and get out of here. Then there was like this whole drama thing back at CPAC, like 2020 or something like that they blocked them all from going to CPAC. And then they made a scene standing out front of CPAC saying, they blocked us. And oh, they're censorship. They're just as censorious as anybody. And they spread that all over the internet like it was a great big deal. And of course, the left took pictures of them. Look who CPAC has here. You mean the people that they banned and left out on the street? Like that was that whole story of CPAC that year. And but then everybody was, of course, bringing up the stuff that would all come up today. Like, whoa, what if we get censorious too? We're for free speech and all that sorts of stuff. And it's just infinitely all those sorts of things. But once again, the right are better at, especially the politically active right, have always been better, if not overly, maybe over the top, at cutting out their baddies in certain places, at least the American right. But the only evidence they had is they had a picture of this kid in 2018 or something doing a Slav squat. The Slav squat is just, I don't have the picture. I don't have the things to pull up here because I thought we'd be kind of talking and all that sort of stuff. But the Slav squat, everybody might have seen it. That was a meme before the Groypers existed, all over the Reddit and all over the internet and everywhere. He had a picture of him doing the Slav squat. It is not owned by Groypers at all. Groypers may or may not have done some. They're online. They're crazy online. They've done, like the time of these kids have done these different memes. Then sometime later, you can go look up these Gopnik dances, of these Slav squat dances. You can see videos. They're like 8-9 years ago of these Russian guys dancing around in those things, drinking beer and dancing around. And then the groypers didn't even exist for like 3-4 years after that. And then along in the middle of that, somebody came and put a Pepe in that Slav squat meme. And that's just, they put Pepe in every meme. There's not a meme that exists that doesn't have a Pepe in it. And groypers do not own Pepe. Like, Pepe's been around forever and everything, but Pepe the Frog and all that sorts of stuff. You can go listen to Jonathan Pajau, and it's actually a really interesting thing. Listen to Jonathan Pajau and Streeter Peterson talk about the duality of the Pepe, because it's like this thing of like a frog and an amphibian, that sort of stuff. But one of the things about Pepe is, if you put Pepe in Hillary Clinton, does Pepe agree with Hillary Clinton, or is Pepe making fun of Hillary Clinton? That's the duality of Pepe. You know, anything you put
the
it
death
in.
of the artist.
Yeah.
You're forgetting, though, that the left believes in some magical, like almost alchemical properties of the universe, which is that if a white supremacist uses something that's existed for years or decades, it becomes white supremacist because they touched it. It's like a Midas touch type situation, you know. And it's like, I was just thinking today about the magical property that if something is verifiably true but is reported on Fox News, it becomes a far right conspiracy theory.
Yeah, they launder it in. Yeah,
it just becomes that. It's like, you know, I mean, like the OK hand symbol. Or like we have the internet record of 4chan going,
milk.
Milk. Like, hey, let's watch them say this is racist. And they make it happen.
They made it racist. They did it. They did it multiple times. That whole thing of it's okay to be white.
That was my favorite 4chan prank, I think.
Yeah, and it's so funny. Then that's just the infinite kind of joke of the Pepe. Like, if you put Pepe on Hillary Clinton and you put Pepe on Hitler, is Pepe saying Hillary's shitty, but I love Hitler? How do you know? Like, why is it not saying Hitler's shitty and I love Hillary? You know, that's the duality of the Pepe meme and that sort of stuff. But that's just all online stuff. None of that is evidence at all of that he's a groper or ever listened to Nick Fuentes once. You need evidence that he said something about Fuentes or listened to Fuentes, or, you know, to be a groper. And people were just repeating it. We saw screenshots of people repeating it on Mormon stories.
It's just extremely stupid too, because like when that the Minnesota Congresswoman lady was assassinated. I was like, okay, you know, like
Horseman.
It's like there's good chance that this is politically motivated, and it probably came from a
crazy right winger.
Because like that's just the most likely thing. Now, like, it turns out that that's probably not the case in this one. You know,
he wrote a manifesto.
It's just like the guy who shot Reagan. You would assume it's politically motivated, and then it came from a lefty.
Yeah.
But no, like, it was just some insane dude trying to impress. Who was it? He was trying to impress. He's trying to impress
Jodie Foster.
Yeah, Jodie Foster.
He was a lesbian. You know, joke's on him.
It's not impossible that Antifa killed the Minnesota Congresswoman, but that would be extremely weird.
Yeah.
You know, and it's exactly as weird as like if somebody on the right killed Charlie Kirk. Like,
but it's so funny.
The confidence. The fucking confidence they had in saying this is definitely a right wing dude. I'm like, wait a minute. Okay.
Turns out he's a groper. Turns out he's a groper. Turns out.
I know. Okay. Well,
within the first 24
hours.
You're
just saying right wing part.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying the right wing part, and it's immediately when he got shot. My assumption was, okay, most likely he's a lefty. There's a small chance he could be really far right. That's a chance. But everybody took that small chance and was like, no, that's exactly what it is. That's what it has to be. And then they're like, he had a trans girlfriend. Oh yeah, a lot of groypers have trans girlfriends.
Yeah,
okay. He put an anti-fascist song on one of the shell casings. Oh, shut up. He's right wing. And then Jimmy Kimmel calling him MAGA.
It's
calling
just like the
fucking
number of
MAGA.
MAGA is the dumbest one.
When people will assume that I'm a Trumper, and I say like I didn't vote for Trump and I didn't vote for a single Republican, and they always say like, well, that's what Trumpers say. Like, okay, then
why do
there's
Trumpers
nothing.
have to say that?
Yeah, like what?
I'm pretty
So they
sure
don't get shot?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Trumpers usually say, "Yeah, I voted Trump."
Yeah, most Trumpers I know do. But anyway, sure, anything's possible. It could come out and around that this was the whole thing was faked to frame people, all that sort of stuff. But you just don't have evidence for that. And then in the meantime, I think there's like speculation that's always a little bit more possible and obvious. And number one, for sure, that Charlie, just like Flip said, that Charlie Kirk got shot is usually kind of an indicator one that it's somebody who doesn't like Charlie Kirk. So he can kind of go like that direction a little bit.
He was a dude that really liked Trump, but he fucking hated Charlie Kirk.
Well, I know we had Colby on here chastising that we were jumping to conclusions here, and he did to me on our thing, even though I was.
Yeah, but we jumped to the most likely conclusion, and we were like, we could be wrong about this, but this is probably true.
Yeah, but he's also a mod in Mormon Stories, and I saw the groper thing popping up over there. He wasn't Johnny on the spot with that, and that's his actual job there. But the Mormon Stories and RFM, they did. I'm getting some feedback here. Mormon Stories and RFM made some educated guesses that he was Mormon. Why wasn't anybody jumping down their throats that they were making those educated guesses? Well, because it wasn't bad educated guessing, you know what I mean? But you're not supposed to say it until. But on the very same program with RFM and Bill, they got upset that the news people were using their minister and lying to their faces that we can't report Mormon until it's Mormon. Said yes, we can deduce and all that sorts of stuff. And like, yeah. But it gets all tough when we're all in the prediction stage and all in the trying to guess what it is and look at it. And I know that the only stuff I went on for sure was stuff that I saw in reports, and then from there, I said when I was making a bet or a hunch, but it doesn't matter anyway.
Well, we got this dude here that says he's too political. Too political for what exactly?
Too political for modern discourse.
Oh.
I think my mic setup is probably giving you feedback. So if you hear echo,
I haven't heard it yet. Again,
okay, I couldn't get my.
I think it's
working.
Well, all right. So we've just been going through the history. I mean, the week history of processing through learning as much as we know now, and maybe what's weird about it. We haven't really gotten into that, but I mean, the text messages. Well, first off, like the progression of do we feel when I heard the text messages, I was pretty solid on. I think we kind of get the idea of what the motive is here, unless all of that is fake, right? But
yeah. So we talked about how a lot of people thought it looked really weird. I thought it looked pretty weird too. But Christopher's wife pointed out that like, hey, it could have been voice to text. You know, I'm like, oh, that's a good point. Yeah, we're getting feedback now.
Yeah, it's doubling.
All right.
So the point is that I thought I listened to the Lotus Eaters explanation of the whole thing. They had a really good episode that kind of broke down everything we know so far, maybe up to through today, unless new stuff's come out. But they pointed out they think there's 3 possibilities with those text messages. One is the kid's highly online, autistic, and views himself as first-person hero type stuff, and talks that way, kind of like a LARPer might talk that way. And so he's strange and awkward and talks that way. Then the second one is that it was the Breaking Bad thing, and that the Breaking Bad thing is that
one seems fairly likely to me.
It would spoil Breaking Bad for you, but there's a scene in Breaking Bad where Walt, when he's getting captured, calls or leaves a voicemail. I can't remember the exact scene.
He calls her. It's Skylar's house. Skylar's phone is totally tapped. Skylar's his wife. She was implicated in it because she was in on it with him. She helped him by the end. She laundered money for him and all that shit. And he knows he's going to his death, so he calls her knowing her phone is tapped and that the FBI is currently at her house, or the DEA is currently at her house. And he like starts berating her and telling her like how he's so mad that she tried to like stop him at every turn and shit like that. Basically just exonerating her. And that's the the theory that's going around here that I think is somewhat likely is that that's what this text exchange was, is this kid trying to exonerate his trans boyfriend.
Was that a misgendering?
That's everyone's misgendering. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like everyone I'm hearing talking about it is saying transgender boyfriend, even on like CNN. What the hell?
No, it turns out the only thing that can invalidate the reality of trans is if they do something evil.
I know. Well, and that's the crazy part is when a trans person does something evil, I at least see a couple people being like, "Hey guys, I know that she was a piece of shit, but let's not misgender her. There's no excuse for that." I haven't seen a single text like that.
There is an exception because Caitlyn Jenner ran over that person, and
Yeah,
she gets to still be Caitlyn.
Yeah. Anyway, the third scenario they presented is
Charles. He seems bussy whipped.
Charles, gosh, Charles said earlier, my daughter asked me to start teaching her to lift weights. Her reason, her ex-boyfriend now claims to be trans and she wants to get jacked so she can kick his ass. I've never been more proud.
Totally valid.
So the third and final scenario is some sort of conspiracy. I guess there could be multiple scenarios of that, but one would have to be from the police officers' end, and the other would have to be over on the perhaps larger cell of people working with the Tyler person to make this whole thing happen. And I wouldn't rule that out, especially in light of a lot of the different stuff that we've seen of like fishy things that other people possibly knew this was going on in the Discord, just from like little suspicious things that were said. There's people who claim that they saw a bunch of people show up at their house like a week before. I don't know how that's very much evidence. Like they had a party at their house. What is that? But
they're degenerates.
The neighbor thought it was weird. Yeah. But then we had a lot of stuff come out this week, and I don't go into detail about this now because I just want to get into the idea of what if it's just what it is on its face value. So, but a lot of stuff came out this week about what should be called kind of militant, militia cells inside of Utah, like armed queers. It came out from Data Republican, and I saw Mike Benz covering it, and a lot of different groups funded by NGOs, even stuff from the UN funding these different groups on how to train them with military tactics. They went to Cuba to learn military tactics and all this sorts of stuff. And they just talked about it openly on their websites and stuff. And maybe some sort of group like that was involved in this whole thing and coaching and leading him through it. I listened to, they declared Antifa a terrorism cell, which I guess we can get into that and get into the cancel culture of all that sort of stuff. But if Antifa is a terrorism cell, I listened to Andy No, who's been like the king of Antifa type stuff, say that it's not likely to be a very useful declaration because terrorism has to be declared for foreign stuff, but you can go after people if some sort of foreign money's involved in it or something like that.
Also, I've been assured that Antifa is it's an idea. It's not an organization.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know why we're even worried about this.
Andy had really good stuff this week. His response to that, to like temper your expectations with that, but also he had it was a very opportune moment for him to speak with Winston Marshall, who was the banjo player of Mumford & Sons, and they went into detail about a lot of different history that Andy knows about Antifa and all that stuff, and some of their tactics, and then some of the ideas in academia behind it all. But it's really interesting to see those two talk because the guy from Mumford & Sons was canceled and removed from Mumford & Sons for tweeting out, "Hey, everybody should read Andy No's book about Antifa."
and he took a Jordan Peterson picture. Like he just took a picture with him.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, I guess getting to like the reaction and the speech stuff all later, like back to the dude in question. Can we narrow in on talking about it as if it was what it is at face value?
Mostly. Like even if
or just at least start from there and then move to the other ones. Like what if it is just what it is at face value? A lone wolf kid.
Steve's in the chat and he says he wants Jonathan's info so he can talk with him.
Sure. I will forward it to him. What's if it is on its face what it is? What's the story we're looking at here? Can a kid grown up LDS in Washington, Utah, just from video games and online culture, go all the way to this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is the real issue about this whole thing. Early on, it was very easy for the people on the right to say it's academia. It's the schools, it's the university. You go to college, the woke professors indoctrinate the kids. But then it came out that actually even though he got that scholarship, he was only there for like a semester or a year or something like that. It wasn't actually very much that he got exposed. And so then you have to kind of look for other sources. But to me, I think the central issue is radicalization. I think, it used to be that there was this question about can people get brainwashed or something like that. And there was a lot of interest in cult indoctrination because you'd have these young people who would go off to college or would encounter some religious group or sect, and it would be like, how they turn into somebody completely different. There's this great documentary from the kind of my collection of cult documentaries called The Garbage Eaters. And it's this Christian radical sect that would approach kids at college and get them to join their Christian group. And basically they'd have to denounce their family and follow this religious leader. And they would go around not planning for anything. And they would basically dumpster dive to get food. And so they became known as the Garbage Eaters. But the family members in this documentary are just aghast because they feel like they've lost their child. And so they're all trying to find their child, and the group moves around the nation. And there's a story where like one of them finds the kid, they go and, I say kid, it's a college age person, and they get them and they basically kidnap them and put them in the van and are driving them back home. And the person is trying to escape the whole time. And it gets so traumatic that they end up having to let them go. But it just all points to this radicalization concept. And I think that Gad Saad has talked about parasitic ideas. And one of the things that I think it's important to humbly realize as somebody who's left religion is that religion, to some extent, in its popular, livable, normal forms, is an antivirus of the mind. It has solid structures of ideas and patterns in your mind that have its own defense mechanism so that you don't take and internalize some of these whack job, nut job ideas if you stay too true to it and you don't go down some of these aberrant paths. But when ex-Mormons leave religion, suddenly that's no longer a thing. And so we go out like babes into the woods looking at every idea, and we're totally vulnerable to some of these movements that can cause radicalization. And we've seen that it's not just religious movements that can do it. It's political movements, it's philosophical movements that can do it as well. And the medium of the internet facilitating the type of rumination and communication and all the social pressures, where you could have a kid that is, held up in his room. I think there's a picture circulating out there, if you have it, Chris, of the parents saying, hey, Tyler just got a computer. Now he can totally ignore us. And it shows him there gaming. And it's just so heartbreaking to see that image, because I have that in my own life and story where, you feel like the internet allows the freedom of speech. It's going to be so great. We got to let these kids participate in it. And we lose sight of the fact that as people who grew up in a church and went through the period of identity integration so that we got a solid, stable identity for ourselves. And so if we leave the church, then we as adults have an easier time maintaining that core identity. But our kids, who we take out of that established pathway of an established religion, they have not yet cemented their identity. And so they are much more susceptible to taking all of these other ideas that have not had the test of time that traditional religions have had of, can you form a stable identity, form a family, and pass on to the next generation and do all the other life things. Anyway, it's just, to me, the lesson about this whole thing is we need to understand and revisit the concept of radicalization and talk about it, particularly in the ex-Mormon space. And it calls back to that moment in the debate between RFM and the Ward Radio guys of like, do you bear any responsibility once you pull people out of the church? And I'm see it now very naive to say no, because there's, this is a danger that we need to be aware of for our own kids, for those of us that have them, and for us ourselves and the communities that we have.
Kind of like if you have it sucks. Sorry, buddy. It sucks that you have a moral framework that makes you feel like you want to die because you jerk off and look at porn too much. But at least you also have a moral framework that tells you not to slaughter people for saying things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why we landed on that. It's almost like the first episode or whatever that we had, just talking about that. Sorry, it's getting the feedback a little bit.
Sorry, I forgot to mute my mic.
But we landed on that too. That you couldn't just leave people hanging, or you had to worry about it. You had to worry about it. You can't just say it's free and open and Star Trek out there forever and just assume society is going to go okay. And I've deconstructed those concepts like a whole lot for a while, because like unity, if we're going to have unification, like unification around what exactly? And there's I listened to Steve and Colby have their discussion on whatever day that was, Wednesday, about the Constitution and all that stuff. And this is one of the greater debates that comes up on the debating right, the places that the leftists never look into or talk about. But some of the things that they discuss are a people of people. What is an identity? And if you really look into all this stuff, there is so much identity involved in all of it. I just re-listened to Christopher Caldwell's Age of Entitlement, and it got into the whole concept of identity politics coming out of our laws and just what our shared idea of the United States is, and saying identity politics isn't an aberration in it. It's the culmination of it, if you really stop and look at it. And so one of the things that came up this week is Jonathan brought up on Mormon Stories a few of these issues, and a lot of the things that we've been talking about so much over the years, we've been pushed out of and banned and removed from these different spaces talking about, because supposedly it's no thoughts, or I don't know what, just behavior or something like that. But we wanted to go over some of those as well, because I think you kind of, I don't remember the whole way it continued, because you were showing it to us and we can't go to those sites to watch and look and comment. So it's kind of just you putting stuff up, and here and there people will send us like some screenshots of the things that happened. But there was some sort of progression of you putting it up, getting it taken down, putting it up, getting it taken down. All starting with Natasha Helfer. It really started with this, right? She put up put up this. Is this where stuff pretty much started this week, when it started?
Well, I think I was kind of just monitoring everything, trying to ruminate on how I saw things, and then also kind of how the reaction was happening. And Natasha Helfer is a pretty significant figure in the ex-Mormon movement. She was on the Mormon Stories board for a long time. She's shown up as the residential certified credentialed expert for mental health and for sexual issues. And so, we've covered before how she's kind of gone down the nut job path of denouncing monogamy and advocating for polyamory. But, all that's lumped into this whole kind of social justice, that which is marginalized, that which is not considered good, must now be centered. And so that's kind of where you get that. So you can sort of take and understand what the response is going to be, like so many of the other predictable people who want to caveat the violence. But I think that the principle that was coming here is there was two things. One of them was equating language with violence and words with violence. And so this is somebody who's a mental health professional who should be good at getting people to keep things in proportion, so that the cognitive reflexes that we all have that may lead to catastrophization, that may lead to all the different things that cognitive behavioral therapy is supposed to protect and guide you from. Instead of steering away from it, she's leaning into it. Language is violence. Words are violence. So if somebody says something that's distressing to you or another marginalized group, we should react as though that is an actual threat, a physical threat. And that is not only not healthy for your own psychology, as the coddling of the American mind with Jonathan Haidt points out that this is one of these trends, but it also then sets this pattern where you then are justified in reprising against that language. And it just occurred to me that, you know, Charlie Kirk, there's a couple of memes out there where he's talked about assassination culture being something that we're starting to see show up. You know, the Luigi Mangione thing happening, where people are resorting to violence as a solution to our political differences rather than dialogue and discussion. And
we pulled it up last week. 50% of Democrats thought it might or possibly be okay to assassinate Donald Trump or Elon Musk, and on that list as well as like J.K. Rowling, and you know, because
okay. So part of the whole cult thing. I remember reading a book on cults. They sort of infiltrated this UFO cult, and it's called When Prophecy Fails, and they're studying what happens when the prophecy fails. So they they make a prophecy about the UFO is going to come on this day. The UFO doesn't come on that day, obviously. And they study the reactions of the different cult members. And one of the criteria, because they say some people, when the prophecy fails, they back off. And some people, they double and triple down, right? And one of the criterion that they have to meet in order to double down is that the ones that are surrounded by the other cult members, when they find out that the prophecy failed, they are much more likely to double down because they have other people around. They have a support network there still to explain to them that, oh, but this is why it failed. It actually didn't fail. They came here in spirit and all this shit. And that's kind of what I feel like, because when we found out about Charlie Kirk, I was just sitting there in my break room, and the guys that sit on both sides of me are more lefties, right? And I was like, holy shit, Charlie Kirk got shot. And what? The right wing dude? And I'm like, yeah. And the first thing he said was, I can't say I'm not happy about that. And I was like, dude, that's shitty. That's a bad, like, I don't listen to him ever. I don't, I clowned on him quite a bit even, but like, I don't want him to die. He seemed like a good enough dude. And after I said that, he calmed down. There was no other members of the cult around him to keep the prophecy in place and to have him double down. And he was like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. That's shitty of me. That's my bad. And he even, like, the next day we were talking about it, and he was like, nah, this has kind of messed me up a little more than I thought it would. And I was like, yeah, me too.
Back to the you were saying assassination culture. You were hitting on coddling the American mind. I just realized I had it like right there on my shelf there. And this is Andy Noah's book too, Unmasked. If you think Antifa is just an idea, but don't say it if you're in Mumford and Sons, you'll get kicked out of the band. Coddling the American mind. I remember it talked about anti-fragility. Is that the part that you're talking about? That you're so fragile that you can't. Humans are anti-fragile, and the way they get strong is by
getting their asses kicked,
clashing up against ideas, sharpening knives, taking on.
Well, yeah, I think even more than that, though. There's an appendix at the end where it talks about there's something like 17 cognitive distortions that are, become problems that produce anxiety in people's minds that therapists should, in the traditional sense, be trained to inform and equip a patient plagued by anxiety over these things to kind of understand and then step back, realize that your thoughts are not your reality. And once you understand them, you can take steps to undo them and then minimize the anxiety that you're plagued with. And so if you lead with the idea that language is violence and words are violence and they can have harm, then you're doing the opposite of that. You're actually giving people more reason to feel the anxiety and the reaction that happens from it. And it was that realization that what this new culture is, whether you want to call it social justice or critical theory or whatever it is, what it's doing is the opposite of CBT, of cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's leaning into these cognitive distortions that lead to unhealthy mental practices and mental processes. And so that was, when you read the book, he mentions that was the realization that said this book needs to be written. And so here we're seeing an example of a mental health professional leaning into an idea that she should be minimizing and deprogramming from people, but rather using it as a justification to it. Violence comes in many forms. I'm deeply saddened for the effect that the shooting had on students, yes, and friends. I don't understand why emotional violence is handed a microphone. So the idea then is that what Charlie Kirk has done is inflicted emotional violence on people, and she can't understand why anyone would hand him a microphone. And this is just a subtle kind of weaselly way of blaming the victim in the case of this assassination. It's the same sort of thing. Well, he spoke words that then kind of, he kind of got what he deserved. And it just struck me, this is like a perfect metaphor for rape culture. And, Natasha Helfer, being a sex therapist, has talked about before many, the idea that if a woman is dressing provocatively or something, that's not tacit permission for you to sexually assault her. And in these places where there's rape culture, is that they'll say is that if a woman dresses provocatively, she's asking for it, and she bears some responsibility in dressing provocatively. And if you tried to make that argument to Natasha, she would certainly reject it, and she could come up with an abundance of reasons why that's not the case. But if you just shift that metaphor and say, well, what if somebody speaks provocatively? Do they then deserve to be assassinated? And
she visually harassed him, so he physically harassed her.
And we have to keep reiterating, Charlie Kirk wasn't any of the things they claim. He didn't advocate for violence. He didn't spread hate. He wasn't anti-gay or anti-trans. He's anti-trans in the sense of anything short of total affirmation is anti-trans. But no, he expressed all the time he loved everybody. He wanted everybody to be happy. The
more hardline conservatives would, I remember listening to Mark Dice videos where he would shit on Charlie Kirk for accepting people like Dave Rubin, for accepting them into the fold.
That's what the Groypers would, the Groypers, who these guys supposedly would show up to those things and yell at him for that sort of deal.
Yeah,
I want to know. I want to know what would happen. I'm very curious. There's one of two options. If you could corner Natasha Helfer Parker and ask her about cognitive behavioral therapy, there's one of two things she would do. One is she would tell you that it's outdated and gross and basically conversion therapy. Number two is she would be like, "What's that?"
Do you want to know the honest truth? Brittany Hartley had a TikTok on cognitive behavioral therapy does not work well for nihilists. You can't use cognitive behavioral therapy because they're right.
But you have to. That's the only thing that works for nihilists.
No, because they're right. Yeah, they're right. They're right that everything sucks and is bad. So
yeah,
so that's what she said. I'm not.
What is her certification? Like spiritual studies or something? Yeah. It's a rigorous scientific realm, so that we should pay attention to that for sure.
It's about as rigorous as.
I'm not taking that way out of context too. I stand by that framing. Anyway, so you put
yeah. The first thing that I did is I just kind of tried. I drew this connection. I vomited onto the screen, so I can read it here. It's like rape culture. She dressed provocatively. She deserved what she got. She shouldn't have dressed that way if she didn't want the consequences. Assassination culture. He spoke provocatively. He deserved what he got. He shouldn't have said those things if he didn't want the consequences. Using actual physical force in self-defense against actual physical threat is a justifiable use of force. But when you equate speech with violence, you lay the groundwork for enacting actual physical violence on someone for what they say. Imagine where that leads. The concept of sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me is a principle that keeps us all safe to have different thoughts and ideas because it distinguishes and separates speech from violence. It never gives someone else an excuse to reprise against your own speech by labeling it violence and then using that violence to justify an actual violent reprisal. I wouldn't want to live in a society where either side of the political divide has normalized the idea that people saying the wrong thing deserved violence or that they had it coming for what they said. it's not a justification you would want your ideological opponents to use against you, and you shouldn't want to rationalize it on your own opponents for the same reason. And then it evokes that quote that's attributed, I think, to Freud, which is the first man to hurl an insult rather than a spear was the founder of civilization, because that, we as a species would be naturally inclined to tribalism and violence. And it's when you're meeting disagreement with dialogue rather than with violence that we can actually start to work together across the many different divides that humanity has. So that was kind of the response there.
It seems like there's a several step program, and I want to put together these steps, right? It's almost like step one is locate a group that civilized society has basically convinced themselves violence against that ideology is totally justified. Nazi, fascist. We've I don't know. We've all pretty much agreed that if Nazis or fascists tried to take over, you'd be justified in using violence against them. Of course, then you get into the whole punch a Nazi debate. I don't think you should punch a Nazi just for saying Nazi things, but that's a whole other thing. And then it's like step two is okay. Now I have to. Because the punch a Nazi debate happens, I have to convince you that Nazi words, not just Nazi actions, Nazi words are tantamount to violence. And it seems pretty easy. You just keep saying stupid ass rhymes like silence is violence and emotional violence, kind of dumb buzzwords and claiming to be accredited in that. So then step three seems to be, okay, now we convince this seemingly disaffected group of people that this other group, anybody that's not them, basically is that shitty group of people. And so any one right of Bernie Sanders is essentially a Nazi, or at least a Nazi enabler. And a Nazi enabler or a Nazi, violence is justified against not only their actions, but their words. And so you can just, it's just like I don't know, it feels almost prophetic and it feels like growing up how they told you how Satan just leads you step by step, I don't want to preach gospel here, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah, you get into the era of problems with type 1 and type 2 errors, right? But everybody's always jumping quicker to the conclusion, like these are the baddies that we got to get or they're going to get us or something like that. But sorry, I've got a football game going on.
So the next thing I did is I when I come up with something I think is worth being a springboard for discussion, I'll try to make a meme for it. So I created a meme. I had trained an AI model on Charlie Kirk using some of the new tech that I made, and it's not this one actually. It's one before.
You meant the one with the that had the rape culture stuff on it?
Yeah, I might be able to bring it up if you don't
I'll
have
find
it.
if you want to.
Okay. This one was actually allowed for a while, and it generated some discussion. But there's always the the question of do we really want to allow any form of excuse on that? And it's the people would say, well, you can't problematize. A woman dressing provocatively is very different from Charlie Kirk, whatever it is. The point is just to spark the thinking of finding parallels in the sorts of double standards that we tend to have when we're leaning ideologically in one way or the other. And that was allowed to go for a little bit. I just checked, and they have removed all of my posts about anything having to do with Charlie Kirk. There were a few that were allowed there that now any screenshots that I took of them, just anytime I post in Woman Stories, I always screenshot it right after I post it because they get taken down so frequently.
Well, it's funny. Part of that is the people that complain. Because I've had discussions with mods on different ex-Mormon Facebook pages, and one of the mods was telling me I got booted from ex-Mormon, not this. Well, I got booted from all of them basically, but on the actual ex-Mormon group on Facebook, I got booted because basically this woman turned it into her her trans testimony meeting. So she kept talking about trans stuff. I never brought up trans stuff, but if she brought it up, I would push back. And I did my very best. That was on my best behavior, I swear to God. Trying not to be snarky, just trying to refute arguments and stuff like that. And finally, the mod booted me, and I chatted with her about it, and she's like, I had so many people begging to take you away. I was like, okay, here's the deal. Like, you had a ton of people begging you to take me away who were doing the exact thing that you were accusing me of. That's the thing with this, is that the reason the lefty politics never get taken down in Mormon Stories podcast group is because, like, the conservative leaning people just kind of look at that and they're like, that's stupid, whatever. And then they don't bitch about it. Yeah. And if all of them bitched about it as much, then it'd be a problem. Then John Dehlin might actually have to enforce his no politics rule.
Well, they might, because one of the times that Jacob Hansen gave me a temporary ban, and I'm like, I didn't break a rule, and he's like, well, I get a lot of complaints about you, and I'm like, so what? Like, I didn't break a rule.
Were the complaints valid? Tell me.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, and just that, and he kind of went quiet. But
well, I mean, I think what this conversation will eventually get to are some of those invisible, under the surface, systemic aspects of a community that lead to a form of bias and lead towards echo chamber creation. It doesn't even have to be what is said, but rather what is prevented from being said because of group dynamic stuff like who complains or who claims to be offended. But the meme that I posted was this was the first one, and this one has now been blocked and deleted. It's we who have studied cults have some familiarity with radicalization and how it distorts the way you see outsiders and opponents. Celebrating or justifying the death of someone who speaks against our own values and principles is a sign of our own radicalization if we find ourselves submitting to that impulse. It's a tough thing to face and admit when it's in our own heart, and we all have this vulnerability, and so we should all approach it with some humility. And that message tied to this particular meme is just to say, we might be okay rationalizing something in one dimension because it fits with our ideology, but even though there's a parallel concept happening that doesn't fit with our ideology, we won't rationalize it there because it helps us maintain that sort of ideological frame. And if it leads then to you celebrating the death of somebody because they were opponents of your ideology, you just have to, there's certain things in your life that you have to step back and say, wait a second, that's a red flag. Something is amiss. And I had this moment in the midst of the Protect LDS Children. I was involved in the activism there, working with Sam Young, was doing stuff to try to get that message out. And there was one moment where I was contemplating and discussing what would happen for people who would try to work against Sam Young. And the thought entered my head, well, we'll identify them, we'll find out where they work, we'll make sure that people know. And I had to say, whoa, wait a second, hold on a second. The things that I'm now considering as what I would want to do in this crusade of activism are against the principles that I would want someone to do for me, what I would want, people who disagreed with me to do. I need to step away from this project and recalibrate and regather what my values and principles are. And I need to make sure that I'm not going in that direction, because that is a pathway towards radicalization. When you allow an issue or a philosophy to become so dominant and so driving that you subordinate any other consideration of the humanity of the people that you're dealing with. So this, when I'm saying that this is a impulse that we are all vulnerable to, I think that what we learned in coming out of the cult and learning about all these psychological things, we need to make sure we're continuing to apply it in all of the different things that we have there. And that was the message of this meme. It's got probably too many different signals trying to come out at the same time. So people are probably like, well, those words don't really match the meme. But that was kind of the first one.
Some people thought that you meant that Charlie made those quotes too, which was unfortunate. That I thought it was pretty obvious at the first that you were just talking about what those ideologies meant. Like if you believed in rape culture, or if you believed in assassination culture or something like that. Those are not quotes of Charlie.
Well, you were talking to the most nuanced people on earth. They really understand subtlety.
But anyway, so it continued from there, and I got a little bit lost in the timeline, which, by the way, I don't know if we wanted to get into this, but anybody remember this meme floating around forever, like 4 or 5 years ago? We've talked about it before.
I remember it floating around 5 years ago. I remember it floating around 4 years ago. I remember it floating around every fucking year at some point.
The paradox of tolerance with the philosopher Karl Popper, which I guess is some of the stuff that we're sort of getting into, or we'll keep getting into as we get down the line and start talking about speech afterwards and all that sorts of deal. But Karl Popper's ideas aren't bad, but the people who mostly toss this meme at you don't believe in Karl Popper's philosophy of it. We've talked about before that it's actually Marcuse's repressive tolerance, not Karl Popper's paradox of intolerance.
Should Rochester, do you want to come on and explain your position?
Yeah, you can come on.
Yeah, afterwards. I mean, let's kind of
get that a Poe. I'm just wondering if that's a Poe or if that's somebody serious.
Let me see here. You're sharing something, Jonathan. I'm going to get to those because I have the other ones on the screens, but
I think anytime you look at the way the public has taken and run with the myth of the paradox of tolerance, you kind of have to always, as you did, bring up the Marcuse
repressive tolerance.
Yeah, the repressive tolerance thing, because it's just like the logical step.
It is jumping off of that philosophy and to the next level of what they must do to repress fascism. And I mean, it's a whole what would you call it? Like an essay that he wrote. It's not a very long essay. You can listen to it. And if you want to, James Lindsay reads the entire essay if you want to go listen to it on one of his podcasts. Just look up Herbert Marcuse's repressive tolerance. And that thing just straight up says that any right-wing ideas must be suppressed and any left-wing ideas must be tolerated. And it is jumping off of
up to and including violence.
Up to and including violence. Yeah, violence is okay towards the right wing.
Yeah, if the left is doing violence, it's a good thing. And then the right should be pre-censored. The right should actually be prevented from thinking conservative thoughts.
Some of this, like we talked about last week, it jumps off of like Franz Fanon, who Obama mentioned that he read a whole bunch in college and all that sorts of stuff. Not saying that this is all directly like from Obama, but all this stuff really does kind of branch out. But the wretched of the earth, it was pushed into this society here by what's his name, the French existentialist, the one who was married to Simone de Beauvoir, and they boinked a bunch of underage girls together. Sartre. Yeah, Sartre brought Fanon to the West, and his ideas.
You're gonna have to narrow it down a little bit.
You're gonna narrow it down that they boinked a bunch of underage kids together as a couple. Okay, I'll narrow it down a bit more. They signed off on the lowering the age of sex affidavit. Does that narrow it down for you?
Does not narrow it down.
That did. Oh, that actually added names. Okay. Anyway, Sartre brought in Fanon, and Fanon brought in the ideas that the only way to recompense for all these types of things was to bring about violence. And then from there on, this is talked about a bit at the end of Andy Knows and Winston Marshall's podcast this week. The guys who know about Antifa and what happens if you go and talk about this sorts of stuff. But they brought up that going back all the way throughout academia, we've talked about Foucault a million times here. It really jumps off of Foucault that any sort of discourse is just a power act. Discourse is not what would you call it? Like a dialectic, like an intersharing of ideas where you come to know each other better. It's a power act. It's a power act on each other. And then from there, you jump into different ideas, like any sort of group, like just any sort of thing that comes out unequal in a group must also have been an act of violence, not just an inequality. Gendering people, categorization, reading Gender Trouble from Judith Butler, gendering is an act of violence. And the only way to recompense for all of these right-wing thoughts of violence is to tolerate left-wing acts of actual violence. Let's see here. Yeah, I thought I had that one in the things. But anyway, so moving on, this was This is a new post, or was this a comment? This is a new
So
post.
this was the follow-up post, and this is, it's kind of going on. This is at the moment where now the narrative has shifted and people are starting to say, actually, it was MAGA. He was MAGA, and he was Mormon. He was Mormon and he was MAGA. And so now we need to understand, did he get radicalized, or did he find justifications in the Book of Mormon or in Mormon theology that would have facilitated him seeing this as a righteous act? And so there was somebody in the group who posted a question that was in that direction. And so I said, well, let's see, now that we know that he's not, and this is very early on where most people had not yet gotten the information that he was not a member of, that he was not of the MAGA or whatever. That was still what they had. They hadn't yet seen the text. They hadn't seen the evidence that he was indeed attached to trans ideology or the gender stuff and the far left stuff. And so So I put a post that had some images from signs from trans right activists thing. One of them is, the only good turf is a dead turf. And the other one is, are you a transphobe? Then you should kill yourself. Essentially, those are signs that exist in protests that have happened in the past for trans rights movement. So I said, this is a test to see if there is an ideological bias in the group. The following is a screen grab from a post yesterday that was still up at the time. It asserted that since the Charlie Kirk shooter looked up to Nick Fuentes and his hateful groypers, did Mormon theology radicalize him? Was Kirk a hypothetical Laban? Laban was killed so the Nephites could continue their culture and worship in their culturally genocidal ways. It's better that one man should perish than a nation should dwindle and perish in unbelief, citing that Mormon scripture. Now, that question that was posed is an understandable line of questioning when you're pondering the source and nature of right-wing radicalization, because that's, the groypers are these far right, according to the narrative that was happening there. Now that it has been confirmed that the shooter was not, in fact, motivated by far-right ideology and was living with a trans-identifying man, the question of the source and nature of radicalization still remains, but a different line of questioning would be in order. So transposing that original post, which we already knew was allowed because it stayed and it was allowed to be, a whole bunch of discussion on it. The new line of questioning might look something like this. The shooter allegedly looked up to trans activists. Did queer theory or gender ideology radicalize him? Was Kirk a hypothetical transphobe or TERF? Trans activists have been saying that transphobes should kill themselves, or that the only good TERF is a dead one, and you can see the signs in the image, in order to protect trans people. So this is a line of questioning that, with the same justification as that original post, should be allowed open air discussion in this forum if we're going to say we examine all sides of issues without regard to political considerations. Now, it doesn't matter which side you examine. The thing that is worth examining is the radicalization. This is the key that we should be trying to understand, whether it is right or left. The psychological vulnerabilities, the groupthink, and social pressures at play are still going to be playing a role. They're still going to be there. So those of us who have left a high demand group and looked at how those distortions of reality and morality function should be better at seeing this pattern. But we have to actually be willing and allowed to look and ask. And if these questions are not allowed to be examined, then we should understand that we are in a bubble of bias and an echo chamber that is part of the problem of radicalization itself, because it's only in these echo chambers where no diverging opinions are allowed to be considered legitimately. That is what accelerates and facilitates the radicalization. And so if we see that's happening in our nice community online, then that should be a red flag. Hold on a second. We are part of the problem. So I'm not trying to get them to agree with me or any other perspective about Charlie Kirk or his murderer. I'm just trying to say we need to examine the nuts and bolts of how we are creating an echo chamber if we can't talk about the pros of Mormonism or the cons of ex-Mormonism. You have to be able to look at both things.
Some of the ideas that it can deracinate you from.
All I heard there was a bunch of far right hate speech.
Yeah. Well, I guess are we getting to the label stuff? Sorry, Flip, I'm gonna cut you off.
No, I'm gonna bail here anyway. It's a good time. Anyway. I've been going longer than I wanted to.
I might bring in Christopher if a flip bails, if that's cool with everybody.
Oh, we live in a bubble. Rochester says we live in a bubble.
Yeah, Rochester. Well, we're getting to the point about labels.
Is that before or after listening to what Jonathan just said?
So it was during. It was incredibly ironic that he did that right during.
So Rochester there. Also, Rochester's telling us that Charlie's a Klan member. And we're just about to get into labels here. So
he says the exact same thing as the Klansman.
Yeah,
because he's
thank you for being here as a proof. Because I used to feel like I had to go prove this stuff out there. We got the.
I gotta leave, but Rochester, I'm calling your bluff right now. In 30 seconds, show us exactly what you're talking about, because it's the easiest thing to find. Charlie Kirk, first off, on stage with his gay black friends, you know, and it's also like. Eschewing any form of racism. Like, it's the simplest thing to find him affirming people's right, like of the right of consenting adults to do what they want. Like, you are either lying or you get all of your opinions from propagandists.
Media matters, talking points.
Like, it's that simple. Yeah. Anyway, I gotta bail before I get too sucked into this maniac.
Okie dokie. So moving on to labels.
Your token black friends, of course.
Oh yeah. No. Nice Kafka trap. I love that. That's the most classic and the racist Kafka trap. He can't be racist. He has black friends. Oh well, he's just doing that to mask his racism. Okay, that's
this guy served as a good example of somebody who just whips out labels. Right, exactly. We're about to get to that after he just.
That is a psychological abuse tactic that abusers use to abuse people. You abuser. Oh, he lived in the South. That proves it. All right.
Your Honor, I rest my case. It's funny, if you go to the Turning Point's Facebook page, Charlie Kirk was not the only member of that organization that would go to colleges and ask people to engage in dialogue. And they actually had some black people that would go and do that as well. So the organization that Charlie Kirk founded, that you can find
we got the sundown
where he points out that he's held leadership summits for people of color to get them to be able to advocate strongly for these perspectives as well, and then has sent them out. So there's a black gentleman in particular who you can see a lot of his videos. He's out there representing the same organization. So it would be hard to make the case that his core is white supremacist and racist in that regard, but that messaging is still out there. Okay, so Chris, I put the original post. I just added it.
I've got the top of it here.
Okay, so
you can read it better, maybe. Right.
Going along and following. Yeah, that's the text part of it. Absolutely. Yeah. So going along and following what how the dialogue is going, what you'll find both in our little Mormon community as well as in the world abroad is that labels get thrown. He's a bigot, a misogynist, a racist, a white supremacist, a fascist, and so then it becomes like you could throw a label out in a moment, but in order to actually dig and find out if the label is real, if it's applicable, then it's like it takes a lot of work. It's the whole saying that a lie can travel around the world before the truth puts its shoes on. It's really hard to undo that. So I think that what I was trying to make a point with this next one is just that we want to be aware of the power that labels have. And every few years in Mormon stories, they'll go over all the cult, the bite model, and all these things. And so we should be familiar with the power of language to do these things, but there's something that doesn't get talked about as much. So I wanted to kind of put those thoughts into a post. So this is another post that has been removed as too political and too divisive from the Mormon Stories group, which is labels against ideological foes are a form of thought-terminating cliche. There are words with negative power: apostate, heathen, anti in the religious realm, bigot, libtard, fascist, even woke in the political or secular realm, to name a few, but there are countless others. They paint their target as the enemy without the need to investigate the legitimacy of the claim. They level all nuance and understanding to the binary of good or bad, us versus them. They're a shortcut to in-group and out-group distinction, and so a shortcut to dehumanization. There is a deeper power in play, however. The way you define those negative labels is also part of the control. Groups that exert undue influence will take great efforts to create proprietary definitions according to their own internal ideology, which justifies using them against people that oppose the group or the movement. So when you hear a claim supporting the use of such a label, don't just accept the headline, don't just accept the label. Check the source and the context around the source. Make sure that you understand how this label is being used and whether or not it is justified. And if you find yourself using these terms to describe someone that you see as your ideological adversary, check to make sure you understand why the label is being used, how you got the definition, and whether or not other people might define or understand the label differently and why. Dehumanization takes a heavy toll on your conscience and on society. Be careful with it. So the concept here is that, yes, thought-terminating cliches, you call someone apostate, heathen, racist, or whatever, it shuts down the thought. But even deeper than that we saw, I think, on the race question in particular, is how you define racist is part of the control. Because we, normie ex-Mormons came out and we all thought, okay, race, if you're racist, that means that you make generalizations based on people's race and you treat them negatively and bad, or make assumptions about them bad based on that. That's racist, if you do that. Or if you engage some policy based on race to harm one group based on race, that's racist. And then Mormon Stories was having a discussion with Darren Smith, and he said all white people are racist. And everyone's like, whoa, that sounds racist. That sounds like reverse racist. And it was, no, let me explain. And so that was where the Mormon Stories audience was introduced to the very first wave of critical race theory. And the idea that you can't look at racism as just these things that get done or said or believed. You have to look at it as a systemic issue that pervades all of society. And because it's assumed that whiteness is the preferred and dominant thing, then all white people are racist because they are the recipients of the benefit of that pervasive thing. So they've redefined
any statistical difference is a proof of it.
Right. And so that, I think, but you can see where that redefinition of a term according to a niche ideology or a niche set of ideas that not everyone agrees with is happening in every domain. It's happening in gender. It's happening in sex. It's happening in class. It's happening in all these different domains. And if you don't realize that your words are being redefined according to these ideological and philosophical assumptions, and they're asserted, and they may even be adopted by institutions. And so we think that everyone agrees, but we don't realize that everyone does not actually agree. So I know there was a lot of people in the wake of George Floyd that were wrestling with their own white privilege, and then the white fragility came out, and anti-racism came out, and all these people were like, well, I'm learning about these ways of understanding real racism in a way that I had no idea before. But you just don't realize you're indoctrinating yourself with an esoteric set of philosophical assertions that not everybody actually agrees on. And not only that, but downstream of accepting those assertions, society falls apart because people can't actually work together in a cooperative and cohesive manner.
I also like that. I like that this got removed, even though you put.
I've got the removal.
Well, no, but even the labels on both sides. You didn't just put like bigot and racist. You put woke and libtard on there too.
Yeah, that's right. That's a remake, huh?
Well, so I was very intentional about that because I know that frequently the criticism that I get or that you guys will get is that you're more than happy to point out problems with the woke, but in doing that, you're not also applying equal criticism or looking into your own side in the same way. And so there's an inherent bias in the way you're doing that. So, to be frank, I wanted to make sure that I was including both sides of that. So I did that in the text. And, if you want to go back to the image before this, because this actually didn't happen until a little bit later. Okay, the image that accompanied this was actually not this image. If you go to the last image that I posted in our group, what I originally did is it was this same image, but there were negative terms on both sides of him.
Yeah, I'll find it.
Okay, So the concept here was, you've got the picture of Charlie Kirk, you have these negative terms on both sides, but down there, you've got the two layers of control. The label defines the enemy, but even deeper than that is that the ideology defines the label. And you have to untangle both of those things if you want to try to think clearly about events that are happening. And so I included, bigot, racist, hate monger, fascist, white supremacist, transphobe. These are all labels that are being tossed at the memory of Kirk in justification for what happened to him. And usually under the heading of, if you speak hateful things, then, F around and find out. You'll reap the consequences of it. And so this post was taken down. And I reached out, I went and looked, and I saw that our friend Colby was one of the mods, but I didn't realize he was a Mormon Stories mod before. So I just messaged him. I said, hey, I put a post up and it appears to be removed. No one told me. No one said, hey, this violates this particular term or anything like that. And what I learned through my discussion with the mod was that that mod was made a mod specifically to delete my post. Was not a mod before, and was asked specifically by the founder of the group to delete the post. And if you look at this post, it includes a picture of Charlie Kirk, but I didn't actually mention Charlie Kirk and all of that. I was using the context of what is happening in public debate dialogue right now that everybody's talking about, just to understand that, and I didn't say that these labels don't fit him. I said, when you see the label, you should look at the context to see if it fits. And then you should also make sure the definition is using. So this was not, it was trying to get deeper than current events, but using current events as the platform, because that's what people are actually interested in right now. And so I was discussing with the mod that I was discussing with Colby, and he said, well, I commented on it because I could see that your bias is showing because you did not include positive terms that his defenders might be using that may also be kind of the inverse of those negative labels, thought-terminating cliches in and of themselves, like saint or brother or something like that we see in the religious realm that might cause us to automatically defer or respect someone without investigating that. And I heard his criticism. I said, what? That's not a bad point. That's a legitimate and fair point. And I have no problem with modifying my post in the hopes that it will conform if that in fact was the problem. And so that I went and remade the image, and that's the one that you had up before, where on one side I had the negative terms that have been applied to him, and on the other side the positive terms. And I have no problem. It is still true that you should investigate and look at the source material and see if you agree with these labels and that you understand how they were applied. And some of the comments under here, like a lot of the comments were negative towards me or negative towards the perspective that I was trying to lay out. And I have no problem with that. All of those things, when someone would say something like, well, some labels are objectively true and unambiguous in their definitions, like fascist. He's objectively a fascist, and it's not an ad hominem. It is just a description, and you read that, and that may play well in a comment under a post, but like you go out into the real world and like just Google what is fascism, and you'll find such a broad disagreement about it, and its definition has been diffused so much that it's being applied everywhere, and it's lost some of its core meaning in doing that. So now you can apply it to anything that you want to label as the enemy, which points back to the whole reason of this post, is that we're using labels to shut down thought and identify enemies. And in doing so, we're dehumanizing them, and we're doing it to the extent that we can justify their assassination. And so that, this is all about kind of the group mind think that our culture is seized with at this moment, where we're rationalizing and hemming and hawing over the appropriateness of an assassination of somebody by saying, well, but he said this, or but he said that. It's a big part of the problem. So anyway, I showed this to Colby. He looked at it. He said, okay, I see you've corrected the criticism that I had about its impartial nature. So I said, okay, I will repost it again. And so I redid the text, basically just saying, I added positive labels that should deserve the same scrutiny, and reposted it here, and the mods approved it. They approved it and said it was there. Now, these mods did this without consulting the owner of the group. And so then a lot of people started to comment on it again, some positive, some negative. I have no problem with people disagreeing and making a strong argument that what I'm laying out is poppycock. I think that's totally fine, because that is allowing people to disagree is kind of the whole Charlie Kirk thing. Is like, that's what we want. But then the owner of the group chimed in, and he posted his comment and then deleted and took down the post. And that's what you'll see next. So I said, the original criticism was too biased, so I've redone it. And his response was, it's not too biased, Streeter, it's too political. A ton of people are texting me privately, telling me that they're sick of political conversations in this group, that it's supposed to be about Mormonism. Posts like this and others are causing them to want to leave the group or stop paying attention to it. I really wish people would respect the no politics rule in this group. Talking about the way that the church is handling this situation, or the church's or ex-Mormonism's possible influence on Robinson, that's fair game. Talking about labels as applied to Charlie Kirk just feels polarizing and unproductive for the purposes of this group. I have the deepest respect for you, Jonathan. I just wish you had more respect for me and this group. I really respect your mind and even your ideas. I just think that they continually violate group policy.
Was that that pause that you just put in there, was that intentional?
Stop paying attention to my pauses.
Yeah, only Jimmy Kimmel does intentional pauses when he's talking about destroying Teslas.
No, he knew exactly what I was talking about when I said it. Yeah. I'm worried people will stop paying attention.
Yeah, Jimmy Kimmel put a pause when he was telling people to stop destroying Teslas, to indicate he meant to continue destroying Teslas. So he was accusing you of Jimmy Kimmelism.
I think, I feel for John, because he has to moderate a group that has to stay alive, and in doing that, you do have to draw some boundaries, and he's just choosing to draw a boundary here. And I have no criticism for him in trying to find the right balance. And I think anyone who in this heated type of environment is trying to find the right balance is going to err too much one way or the other. And so this is just part of that process. I have no problem with that. I was a little bit miffed that he translated me trying to express my ideas as disrespect for him or disrespect for the group. I'm trying to operate based on what I understand the notion of free dialogue and free speech are. I don't engage in ad hominem. I try to keep my topics relevant, not specifically to Mormonism per se sometimes, but always relevant to the concepts of the bite model, of groupthink, of these mechanisms that are frequently the subject of discussion in Mormon stories, because they help us to understand and contextualize our experience in Mormonism, but should also guard us against being radicalized in any other religious or secular realm. So that was the parting shot. He sent me this screenshot in a private message after doing so, and so I ruminated a lot on this. I don't have any bad words for him in that. He's trying to do the best in what he does. We've talked about this before. I think one of the issues that will merit discussion for him at some point is audience capture, and the fact that his income is dependent upon the viability of his platform, and that he responds positively or negatively to things that lose or gain donors, is going to take an ideological slant because of the way our society currently is. If you are driven, if your decisions are motivated by the financial consequences of what you cover, then you are going to be driven in an ideological way. And that is, it's one of those things that exists under the surface, that unless you're willing to stand against it and platform things that would potentially lose you viewers, then you're just going to end up shaping and molding and forming the echo chamber. But that's a discussion for another day. Perhaps actually we'll get into a little bit about that now. So, okay.
Are you sharing a screen or something?
There's one other thing. I don't know. Talk amongst yourselves while I find this.
Well, there was the portion where I don't know if this is what you're getting at. You started talking to them about what's politics versus what's just
yes, that's
basic
what I'm
overground.
looking at next. Looking for next. Let's see if I can find it.
Which I think is kind of a larger point we've always been trying to make here. And I think if you go back to the beginning of the entire Trump administration, if you could say like there's been a sort of war against the mainstream media in that era, is there was a huge push in that entire era to understand that the stuff that was being shown to you as neutral was not neutral. It had a worldview itself, and you're swimming in it, so you kind of don't know ultimately that you are. And there's always just been a sense of, maybe not the entire ex-Mormon community, because they say it's not a monolith, but there is a sense, and it's one of the things we've largely pointed at, is that Mormon stories in that world has a certain worldview and morality that is itself a bias, and they don't view it necessarily as a bias, maybe an anti-Mormon bias, but it's a different bias. It's a political bias, and they try to say they are neutral in that area, and they are not neutral in that area. I'm reading the comments by this Rochester person. I don't know, like we're just pulling up everything in the world that ever happened. I mean, we're trying to cover the entirety of the world here.
He's trying to say that churches do bad things sometimes.
Oh goodness!
And I was like, yeah, we're ex-Mormons, dude. Like, we're not going to be like churches. Everything that churches do is right all the time.
Hey, Rochester Swift, you're here in our comment section. We're talking about, put stuff down. You're in there calling people Ku Klux Klan members and the most rotten filth and all that sorts of stuff. Like, maybe you're the baddie, you know. Like, Streeter was muted.
I was explaining to Troy that Jonathan keeps muting himself when he's not talking because he doesn't have his headphones, so we get feedback when he's not muted.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a larger point to all that I don't know that I want
to. No one ever remembers the Inquisition.
Not till somebody brings it up in the. I mean, we're talking about something else entirely, like a thread inside of an ex-Mormon theme in current day Facebook. But it is good to stop and think about the Inquisition at those moments sometimes. So thank you, Rochester. Very, very good. Wait, now we're in the 2nd century of a Greco-Roman doctor discovered blood throwing through the. Oh, he's talking about the blood libel stuff now. Why are you talking about that stuff? Like, if you were here around us at the front, we were making fun of Candace Owen for blaming the Jews. You know,
yeah.
I don't. You're coming in like a bull in a china shop, and you don't know where you're at.
Yeah, do Islam next, buddy. Well, where are we headed?
I think.
Okay, so you can bring us you can take that screenshot down. So I have backroom conversations with some ex-Mormon creators in various spaces, and there's, we don't all agree about things. Some people are very much more in the domain of what we're trying to push against, which is that, those discussions are too divisive and too political, and they're hateful anyway, so we don't want to platform them. And then there's people that are a little bit more on the classical liberal side of things that hold free speech and open dialogue to be foundational to preventing things like radicalization. And so I tend to make that case when I can. So we're ruminating over the possibility, should there be like a forum for ex-Mormons to specifically talk about political issues, and it's okay there. So like if it was Mormon Stories, for example, then if they had a separate Mormon Stories community that allowed political discussion, then that could, at least if there was something that was too hot for the main forum, people could at least have a place where they could discuss it, and then people can choose whether or not they want to have those political discussions, so they don't have to complain to the admins or the mods. And so we were discussing that, and one point that I made was, once you leave religion, the line between morality and politics is gone, everything is then considered political. But only the bad politics are disallowed because the good politics aren't considered politics, but morality. They're considered what is moral, what is good. And that, the idea there is that there's this invisible force happening under the surface of our discussions when we're allowing and disallowing what can be discussed under the heading of it's too political, that is going to foment a bias. But in classical streeter terms, I mumbled my grammar and the words, so people are like, what are you talking about? That makes no sense. I understood every word individually, but nothing in a sentence. And so that's where this larger wall of text came, that I wonder if I am able to post here. So this is, I don't know if you're able to do anything with that, but that's the text of it. And so I sat down and said, okay, well, if I'm trying to flesh out what I'm trying to say here, it would be this.
Okie dokie. How do I get back to StreamYard?
Okay, so that first concept was the TLDR, the too long didn't read. This is the too long didn't read part. So when you're in the embrace of religion, then the world of morality is somewhat separate from the world of politics. You can discuss and debate morality and what is right, and then consider politics to sort of be a different domain. It's got some blurriness at the edges, but there's a perceptible line between them. But once you leave religion, there's no independent moral framework. There's no independent framework for your morality, and the line between right and wrong primarily gets expressed through politics. Everything becomes political. That's even a slogan you'll hear out there, which is that everything is political. There's no separate framework for conceptualizing right and wrong for most people in this mode. Social justice becomes the new moral language. It defines what is right and wrong under the heading of social justice, and it operates through political praxis. Now, if you start diving into the philosophical background of, some of the things that get taught about social justice, praxis is a word that will come up, and it's a word that describes how you're actually acting in the real world on the foundation of the philosophical assertions that constitute the philosophy that's defining morality here, in this case, social justice. So
I've got you on the screen.
Okay, so in communities outside of religion, if you want to discuss anything, it can all be called political. And then the restrictions on what views about those things that are now considered political get to be restrained under the heading of we don't discuss politics. And so it's a weird concept to get around, so I wanted to bring examples. So if you want to discuss the evidence base and ethics of surgical and hormonal interventions in children experiencing gender dysphoria, and you want to point out the contradiction in claiming that they can consent to those irreversible procedures and with dramatic effects, while at the same time maintaining that they can't consent to religious indoctrination, no, you can't talk about that because that's too political. But if you want to discuss how trans-identifying men should be welcomed into women's spaces, sports, prisons, rape centers, well, then that's allowed because that's not political. It's just moral, and it's just, and it's good, and it's right. So all kinds of posts can be allowed about that. The opinions and positions that are considered politically unacceptable get labeled as divisive politics, as too political. And they'll tend to be disallowed or reduced in signal because they are of the wrong politics. They're considered to be immoral because they have the wrong politics. There's no division between morality and politics. Another example, if you want to discuss the wisdom and consequences of defining racism as privilege plus power and condemning all white people as inherently racist, no, you can't discuss that. That's too political. But if you want to discuss how when white people reject the label of racist, that itself is proof of their racism and their white fragility is showing, well, that's allowed because that's not political. That's just moral, just, and good. It's awakening people to their inherent position in the intersectional order. Now, social justice is the default moral framework outside of religion in our day. When you lose the benefit of God through his prophet declaring what is right and wrong, or scripture declaring what is right and wrong, we still need some way to define what is right and wrong. And the thing that doesn't depend on any religious decree is these notions of social justice that get articulated through feminism, through queer theory, through critical race theory. These all sound like philosophical things, but there is a moral core to all of them. They're all defining what is right and wrong, and it hinges on power dynamics, ultimately, oppressor, repressed. So you'll frequently hear people say that they're using Karl Marx's conflict theory and just applying it to different domains, and that's one way of looking at it. Is you just try to identify something that's oppressive and something that's oppressed, and then that gives you a spectrum of what is right and wrong. But again, it's in the definitions, it's in the way that you categorize those things that power gets to be expressed. So in the worldview of social justice, everything is political, but there's a filter over the discourse. The right opinions are moral, just, and good, and the wrong opinions are divisive politics, and we shouldn't allow that because it'll just divide our community. So you allow the former, you disparage the latter, you control the discourse, you ratchet the Overton window more and more until you have an echo chamber shaped by the impulse to do good and to be right. But your morality is built on dogma that you never applied the same scrutiny that you applied to the religion that you left. We're all happy to point out all of the problems of Mormonism, and then we leave Mormonism and we accept new ways of thinking based on the promises and the positive notions of the new ways of thinking, but we never actually examine the darkness or the downsides or the cost of those ways of thinking. And that's where we're starting to see the dark side and the downside in things like not just the public assassination over speech, but the celebration over it, the justification of it. That's the dark side. How did we get here? That's the question I'm trying to get us to, I don't have the answers, but I think that if we're not including discussion about that, we're not exploring it, then that's part of the problem. So what you're left with is a radicalized community whose character is shaped by a warped morality distorted by politics that has corrupted its heart to the extent that you celebrate and justify the murder of someone who thinks differently from you and peacefully engaged in dialogue. Now, thank God the admins had the moral courage to put an end to anyone celebrating in the community. But the fact that it had to be done should cause pause and deep reflection about what it is that led us to that point where it was a problem. And so that was kind of the point I was trying to make there, was that there's, in moderation, in labeling some forms of discussion as too political and too divisive, and we don't talk about politics, if you don't realize that you're only calling the wrong opinion on these major issues too political, and you're calling what is considered tacitly the right opinion, the politically correct opinion, that's not politics, that's just morality. Then you may not realize you're shaping the discourse in the echo chamber, and you're creating the echo chamber believing that you never talk about politics. But by saying you never talk about politics, you're just saying we only allow one perspective here, because you haven't examined how politics gets used as a negative label for this.
Yeah, a negative label. It also becomes a reason to ban people from the group who just had differing opinions on stuff, or in some cases we're just pushing back. Like literally, I don't know for sure, because I don't know the moment some mod decided to boot me from there. It might have been because we talked crap about them on this. I don't know the exact reason, but I do know that the last thing that I commented on was somebody had put up a video that goes through a Foucauldian definition of a Foucauldian history of gender, which when you do that, you're basically pushing queer theory, and it is ideological rather than scientific, presented as scientific. It wasn't just someone, it was friend of the channel Maven. And I only answered, what if I put up a video from a PhD that discussed an opposing position? And next thing I know, I could not find Mormon stories anymore.
Yeah, you were booted. That's too political. And it's the mods that are doing it.
Responding to politics with counter politics is too political.
That wasn't politics. That was morality. Mine was politics. And mine must not be tolerated at all. Well, if that is indeed the reason.
There's this thing that we've heard in the ex-Mormon community, which is that all of the moral thinkers, all of the deep thinkers, all of the people with real conscience and the ability to hold complex, nuanced views are leaving the Mormon church. And so what the Mormon church is therefore going to become more extreme, more radical, because it's only the hardcore true believers who don't care about facts. They're going to dogmatically follow the doctrine. Those are the ones that are gradually being more concentrated, because all the ones who aren't dogmatic and extreme are leaving, right? So we could say, of course, the church is going to get more extreme. Well, that is also true in these domains where this is operating. And you guys are proof of it, where people are talking about controversial issues and the right opinions are just moral, just, and good. And the wrong opinions, too political and divisive, we're going to boot you from the group. So the same principle applies. That means that the group is going to become more and more concentrated with people holding more radical perspectives, less willing to look at more nuanced views and other things. And it's going to shape the echo chamber and the radicalization of the group, because anyone who would express a moderate opinion, or who would say, maybe they have some good points, or maybe there's something to this, or maybe it's not what we thought, those voices get removed. So you're downplaying that signal, and it's just a cycle that leads to more and more of the radicalization. And so in trying to articulate like what's something tangible that we can demonstrate how this works, that's where the meme that is the thumbnail of today's episode comes into play.
I'll pull it. I got it. Easy to get to that one.
Yeah.
And so this is where, we've got two different figures in the news over the past couple of years. Both of them are examples of radicalization. They took a set of ideas that some people could reasonably hold in moderate forms and still operate within society and still be functional and everything, but they've become radicalized. They've taken those extremes, they've become totalizing in their mind, and those perspectives and ideas dominate over any other consideration, including human life. And so we have Lori Vallow, who with Chad Daybell was convicted of conspiracy in a heinous murder of some children. So if you've been following Mormon stories, they drank that up. It got views. They had panel after panel, discussion after discussion. Every new thing in the news generated hours about talking about the crime itself. What is it in Mormon doctrine and Mormon culture? What are the examples and historically about other Mormons that have been radicalized, so that we can understand just how this radicalization could have happened. And the thing is, all of that is totally legitimate, and it's perfectly appropriate for the channel to do. Now we've got this more recent case, Tyler Robinson, a former Mormon who allegedly committed a heinous murder. We have to use the word allegedly. It's not been proven in trial, but the evidence is very, very strong. And the document of the confession is added on top of that. But when you try to discuss in that same forum what radicalized him to, no, that's too political. That's too divisive and too political and not allowed. And again, the memes and what I'm trying to point to is not trying to justify or defend Charlie Kirk. Is trying to say, hold on a second, what are the things that got us as a society or us as a group to get to the point where some of us are celebrating this murder or justifying it or excusing it because there's something deeply dark, rotten, and radicalized about that. Like that is if you don't see that is a radical position that should not be held in a productive, civil, cohesive society, then it's one of those wake up moments. Wait a second. If these are the impulses that were coming out of me, I need to step back and say, I may be taking these things to such an extreme that I'm dehumanizing people in a way that is not true to who I would really want to be. I need to step back. I need to listen to different voices. I need to log off of the internet. I need to touch grass and come back into touch with my own humanity and realizing that all of us are vulnerable to radicalization, especially it's around these themes of what is moral, just, and good, and wanting to feel good and be righteous, and all of the social feedback that we get in social media. All of these things are a torrent of radicalization. And when they're facilitated by a community and a group that silences one side of the debate, one side of the discussion, it just amps it all up. And that's what I was hoping to push back on in Mormon stories. But as I have been for years, it generates people who disagree with my arguments and my perspective, even though I never engage in ad hominem. And so sometimes rather than dialogue and make their own counter argument, they will complain to the mods And it's just that signal that the mods are getting. It's like, oh, more complaints. Okay, well, the easiest thing for me to do is to just shut down and block and remove this post so that people don't complain about it. But what that does is it just gives a weapon to people who have figured out that what they can do is just complain to a authority figure and silence their foes without having to actually make a counter argument. Anyway, so that's kind of the whole thing that I would have lay out.
I thought this was pretty fucking hilarious. Like, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of like a rabid ex-Mormon activist type guy, which I know there's a lot of. My initial thought, if I'm that guy, upon hearing Charlie Kirk was shot in Orem, Utah, would be like, okay, there's a decent chance this guy is Mormon and came from a Mormon family. But if he's an active Mormon and he shot Charlie Kirk, that means he disagrees with Charlie Kirk, which means he's probably a progmo, which is not something like the progmos are the people that I want to sort of put forward if I'm the ex-Mormon activist, right? Like the Dan McClellans, the Patrick Masons, all those, the progmos. If he's not, that means he's an ex-Mormon and he's just completely me. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stay away from this. I'm just going to back the fuck off.
Yeah, well, there's a level of it. Like you said, he has to strike a balance, and we know he has to strike a balance. That there's some audience capture in there in that. He tells you that people are texting me, people are calling me that this is too political. I don't want to talk about this. These are my donors, all that sort of stuff. I get and understand that. But that's also a financial decision, not a truth decision, which gets to some of the issues where it gets difficult when people wrap up their livelihoods and all this sorts of stuff. And I don't know like how that deep goes or how deep that goes or what sort of line he's supposed to toe for who, which you'd have to ask that of anybody who is taking money on the internet, of course. But when I look at them, when I look at a lot of these different things, you see this sort of scaffolding. It goes all the way back to when Tim Pool talked with Jack Dorsey on Joe Rogan's podcast that notoriously kind of famously changed Twitter, in the sense where he stopped and he talked to him and his commissar. He had some lady there who was the what do you call it? Like the mod or the head mod, all that sorts of stuff. And she was talking about just completely baffled that she said, anybody who doesn't agree to the trans stuff causes harm. And anybody who does it, you must affirm and all that sorts of stuff. And Tim had to explain, you see how that bans one side of the political aisle entirely. And a lot of those people who believe the other side of that hold that belief in good faith. They genuinely hold that belief. And it causes a major change and a major shift in the outlying or the way that you ban and mod your entire community there. So you get a bubble, like a blue sky bubble. That Twitter for a while there was almost kind of like a blue sky bubble. And those sorts of bubbles, when they get all the way in their bubble, they're not bouncing around looking at truth anymore, right? They start just getting wilder and wilder, just floating off into the ether like tiny bubbles. I'm forever blowing bubbles. And for a couple years, people pushed back on me and stuff, but I kind of joked or thought that those guys weren't sharpening their knives the same way Charlie Kirk was sharpening his knife. Like Charlie Kirk, I bet you it was kind of one of the jokes or funny things about Charlie Kirk is that he would go to these college campuses and say, I've never been to college. And these people, what are your credentials? What are your this or that? And he'd say, I've never been to college. Oh, ha, ha. And he's like, oh, well, it should be easy for you to defeat me, right? It should be easy for you to beat me. And he would make it very, very difficult to people. And they'd find out, maybe not that they're not smart. They'd find out that they hadn't come across arguments for their positions. And you can get better at arguing. He was sharpening the people he was arguing with as much as he was sharpening himself, That's what happens when you discuss ideas. And the paradox of tolerance that thing posts and that those people put out there is they think tolerance, it's part of concept creep of words. They think tolerance is you have a bad idea, that means you're intolerant. It actually in Popper talks about tolerant to being willing to talk things out. You know, are you willing to talk things out, or are you just somebody who just, no, I think a bad thing? Well, that means you're intolerant and you must be dealt with. You know, that's not the idea of Popper. You know, one that deals with Nazis, one of the things people bring up with Nazis, the Nazis and all that sorts of stuff is they weren't on a level of wanting to sit and talk things out or try to do things properly or through any sort of law. Like, one of the things I generally ask is like, if we were in a fascist Nazi state and Goebbels just got shot at our school the other day, you know, what does UVU look like right now? You know, is this a fascist Nazi state, or is it just kind of conservatives that were probably left of what conservatives were in the 90s?
That's the argument that we hear a lot, though, in this is like, well, you know, you're mad about people celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. You don't think people celebrated the death of Hitler? Like, look at this, the parallel. You know, you're a hypocrite because people would celebrate the death of Hitler. How would you respond to that?
People celebrating the death of Hitler? Well, that was the end of a war, so that you know, it could have meant that their lives were literally possibly saved, like at that moment.
Yeah, here's the thing. I think,
but they try to say that their lives are in danger and they're facing genocide themselves nowadays.
I think the closest you come to celebrating a death is saying, sort of somberly saying, okay, I'm glad that was over. Like, that, unfortunately, that person needed to die. Like, that's it.
I remember my moment when bin Laden died, and it was a whole lot like that. And then actually kind of stopping and wondering if he was even real. Like, was all that whole 10 years just a figment of my imagination? Was that the Sopranos TV show or something like that? Or was that just all a huge hassle until that guy died? And I was not jumping up and down and cheering. But,
well,
even in making that argument, what they're equating is the sins of Hitler and the sins of Charlie Kirk. That's the assumption behind that question, which is a pretty far cry. Like, as a society, there are times where the death sentence is justified. You know, certainly there are people with philosophical disagreements with that, but historically there are crimes for which society together has come together and said that there's a justification for a death penalty. But they don't give it for a traffic ticket. Like, there's proportionality, there are thresholds, there's ways to look at crimes in grades. But in doing that, we've drawn a line about speech. And you can have terrible, heinous ideas, but they don't merit assassination. And so that those questions just come from such an intense desire to completely demonize and dehumanize the person, you know, of Kirk in that case. But if it was applied to anyone else, it would be the same thing.
mm-hmm.
Whenever I think of the morality of, like, ethical killing, basically, I think of Ned Stark, right? The very first episode of Game of Thrones, you know, he's a king of Winterhold or whatever, and Winterfell. I don't remember. I'm getting Skyrim and Game of Thrones mixed. But anyway, the very first episode, he has a deserter from the wall, and the law says that he has to put the guy to death, right? And you could say that's a barbarian law, and yeah, it probably is. But you know, they're in barbarian times. But he has a very somber moment with his son, where his son's like, "Why can't you just have somebody else do it?" And he says, "He who passes the sentence should swing the sword." So it's I really like that. Ned Stark is like the only good character from Game of Thrones. There's a lot of good characters, but like he's like a Lord of the Rings character inserted to Game of Thrones, and so he has this sense of rigid morality, which I really love. And I think almost, if you think someone ought to be killed, then you ought to be willing to kill them. And that should really set you back. That should really make you think really hard. Like, could I actually do this? Do I really think this is a good idea? And I think most people wouldn't be willing to do that. I hope.
Well, I mean, I think we wouldn't have thought that, a 22-year-old would be capable of what this was capable of if you just go back a few years and see the pictures and hear the description of him. But I think in looking at lessons learned from this whole event, I go back and think about my journey outside of the church. I left the church. I still had young children at home. And I've seen the influence of a lot of these, what I call untested ideas and untested philosophies. I say they're untested just because they're untested in the minds of the youth these days. They are in fact tested. We've had moments before, like in the 60s, where these the philosophies that look at the world through this lens of systemic powers and pit people against each other as oppressor and oppressed have taken over the minds of people of an entire generation before. And we saw the result of it in the 60s. We saw the result of a form of that ideology sweep through China in the Cultural Revolution and completely upend thousands of years of cultural history. And so they have been tested. They are destructive. They are toxic to a society, but we forget the lessons of history. So we're seeing them again infect the minds of our younger generation. And so I have to humbly acknowledge that I made a bunch of mistakes as a parent coming out of the church. I was not as careful over the exposure that my children, who had yet to form their identity, who I had yet to cement rigidly the strength of the values that I held that enabled me to have a cohesive life, a productive life, and operate in society. And so they were getting ideas from strangers I had no idea of. I've learned that some of my kids were connecting with people through their Nintendo DS, through the messaging that was possible in video game systems that I didn't even have an idea of. It. Discord in particular is a central part of this news. And that has been, it's like a complete cesspool of predators and groomers.
Roblox.
Oh
Yeah, and like these things that we allow our children to engage with, thinking that they are harmless. We need to wake up to that, and it's not wrong it's not oppression to say you should not have access to this, because it's like letting complete strangers into your house to do a sleepover with your kids, because your kids are staying up talking with these people who have their own agendas, their own ideas. They don't pay any consequences for ideas that they'll infect your kids with. And a lot of these ideas, they come almost always married to the idea that if your parents disagree, or if your parents try to make a different argument, they are part of the problem and you need to cut them off. They are wrong. And so these people,
grooming.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, if you are leaving the church and you have kids, do not let them get independent access to the internet. Do not let them have access to Discord. Do not take your parental responsibility to be the source of your values and your perspective to your kids, because the values and perspectives that they will get and internalize and will shape their character and their personality as they go through adolescence. They're looking around and they're almost, hoping that they can find something to distinguish themselves from you. And so one of the benefits we don't realize as part of the evolutionary power of religion is that the kids in that moment of adolescence, when they're trying to distinguish themselves from their parents, are surrounded by people in the church activities, in the church group, who hold similar values to their parents. And so they will reinforce the values and principles that their parents will have, even though they are not the parents. And as the kids look up to them, they'll see that as a viable model, and it will not be in contrast or contradiction to their parents' values. And so it has a form of solidifying and strengthening the positive aspects of that culture into the next generation. And we've lost that as we leave religion and we just let things drift in the wind. It's really tough.
Steve is commiserating with you in the chat. He says, "Thanks for the talk, guys. Unfortunately, I learned some of this with my kids the hard way." I've said this for a long time. I do not envy guys who leave the Mormon church when they're like grown adults with a wife and kids and an established life. Because I was like 22, and it sucked then, like it sucked because, I had like a wife that was in a church, and that was very difficult for us. And luckily we kind of like, we made it through, we made it work. But I don't know. I at least I had some time before I had kids to at least sort of establish a somewhat of a rudimentary moral framework. But I don't know, your moral framework is so solid when you're in a religion, especially in Mormonism, in what people would call more high demand religions. You have an identity and a framework already totally established. And once you leave, that's just gone. I remember talking to a close friend of mine who, she was probably, I don't know, like in her early 40s when she left the church, and she had kids, and one of her daughters was wanting to wear a crop top to school. And she's like telling me, I don't want her to wear a crop top to school, but I don't know how to tell her that. I was like, well, first off, it probably violates the dress code of the school, so that's not very difficult. But and she went on to say, like, I don't want to slut shame her. Like, you don't have to slut shame her. You just tell her, like, you're too young to dress like that. It's just the rule in our house. It's very simple. But because her entire moral framework had just collapsed out from under her, everything had crumbled. She's like building an identity from scratch, an identity and a moral framework, as a 40-year-old woman with kids who depend on her for a moral framework. And that's just gotta be utter hell.
Yeah, well, there's a side of this too that I'm not just afraid for the kids in general. Well, I mean, the kids are going to be the future and all that sorts of stuff. But some of it just is been just the general unawareness of what people have gone through in college. I know this guy only got like a year of college, but this stuff spreads down. It spreads down to high school stuff and everywhere else, and it's all over the media and the internet, and it gets to video games and all that stuff too. Internet culture, Twitter, all that sort of stuff. I mean, I saw John Lynn try to say, I think this is just internet culture. Well, what is overall internet culture? I mean, there's all sorts of weird little niches out there. But Stephen Colby had the Constitution thing of like how we could reunite around the Constitution type stuff earlier this week. And one of the problems, one of the deals we've been screaming at or kind of yelling at or trying to, I don't know, like raise up a red flag about is the concept of common sense. The concept of common sense, I won't use like the big words of who said it and all that sorts of deals. The status quo common sense is repressive to these worldviews. There is no common sense. There is no unity around those types of things. They attack every single one of those Enlightenment values that you could appeal to back. I'm saying it's been a large movement by what we generally call like the cathedral stuff like that, just academia, the media, politics, all that stuff. And one of the things about maybe like the top influencers in ex-Mormonism is in some levels, since they're always kind of there playing a little bit of the propositional game, like what's just true, we're just going to empirically look at what's true, but they're not just playing that game, right? For years, it was just that game. But then after a while, it turned into mostly an identity game, an identity politics type game, which gets into that same stuff that Jonathan was talking about of morality versus politics. But it is all identity politics. Like if you go and look at An Inconvenient Faith and just look at the titles of every episode, there's one that talks about propositional truth, and every other one of them looks like it's an EEOC audit. It's an audit from the Civil Rights Union or something like that of the church. And so it's mostly these identity things and these issues that people felt, especially that Charlie didn't like. They probably didn't care so much that Charlie thought God was there or Jesus popped up or something like that. They cared more about the EEOC stuff, the Civil Rights era stuff, because Charlie once said there's problems with the Civil Rights Act. And Colby talked about in that episode with Steve about different ideas that come out of laws, and he talked about advantages and disadvantages. But I mean, if I go with Nicomachean ethics of like Aristotle, there's extremes, there's excesses and deficiencies. Virtue is kind of striking a balance of it. Could there be excesses in ideas around identity laws? If we put in identity laws into this country, do we de facto kind of form like a second constitution? But beyond that, does it necessarily lead to the like even just the opposite side having to react with their identity. It necessarily must like lead to that. And so, but if I look at these ideas of where you can't discuss stuff, I just typed into Grok, like what are some Enlightenment values, and then asked how could intersectional postmodernism devalue each one of these Enlightenment values. And one of the things we've always talked about is you can take almost any single one of what we thought we all shared as common beliefs, and there's a slogan that attacks it. And there's not just a slogan, but there's, as we've been finding out as stuff goes, there's NGOs out there helping to attack each slogan. They're forming groups about the slogans. They're passing on things about the concept of reason, the concept of individualism, the concept of liberty, the concept of what equality or equity even is, skepticism, progress, like all that. Every single one of those things has an identity attack to it now. And when stuff turns into all identity attacks, it turns into tribes and tribal attacks. You get past the Enlightenment thing, and if it's all just tribes and we can't talk to each other, then all that is left is war, which is one of Charlie's main things. If we can't talk, what else is there? You know. And he was opting for talking.
I don't know. Sounds gay.
Yeah.
I don't know. This almost sounds like right-wing shit to me. Christopher, what's that? Oh, Christopher had a great comment up here. They're still arguing with Rochester, but we're finding some common ground on tacos versus burritos. We're trying to make a friend here. And Rochester was definitely right about traumatic brain injuries, right? Like you are one traumatic brain injury away from being a psychopath. Yeah, I agree with that. You're totally right. But if you say burrito over taco, you're totally wrong, and we will fucking ban you. But Starbase asked him if men can get pregnant, and then he said, we don't have a neurological background to discuss trans issues. And then Risto asked him if rabbits could fly. And where is it? It was Christopher had the best. It was some it was a postmodernist take. He said if you throw a rabbit, then a hawk catches it, and then you conceptualize them as one. Yes. Troy, get out. Burrito over taco? God, I used to respect you. The burritos are great. If you have a good burrito, it's amazing. It's amazing. But they're easier to screw up than tacos. Tacos are just so easy to do. Jack in the Box can do tacos right. Like those shitty, greasy, disgusting things with soggy lettuce and a gross piece of fucking American cheese slapped in there, like not even disguised as something delectable. They're great. So tacos, easy to do. They're great. Oh, we're gonna have to ban a lot of people.
Yeah.
Jonathan, you got a question?
Okay, so question: what would I do differently? So, number one, control cell phone use. Nobody gets a cell phone until they can. Honestly, I mean, nobody gets a smartphone. I think it's reasonable to get a phone that does not have internet capacity. Sorry, I have a dog that's.
Jonathan Haidt actually put out some recommendations for the whole thing, and even like talked about pushing to some different schools the ideas of what to do with the kids.
We've got
I think there's a movement among schools to completely ban cell phone use during school hours.
Absolutely,
and I agree with that completely. I think it takes away from education. So I think internet and social media restriction, absolutely. And it's to the point now where it is so dangerous that I would just say that it just shouldn't be a part of kids' lives until are old enough to have a formed identity. And that's, a lot of schools say that you have to use the Chromebook and everything. And so I don't know, it's difficult. I'm probably a little bit more reactive from it just because of trauma that I have in my own history from it. But I just think that it's not just taking those things away. It's making sure that you're replacing it with some things that are positive. And the thing is, like, I feel like leaving the religion, if you're going to do that, you got to find some sort of local community that you are engaged with, that you are connected to, that includes a new identity, some new thing that you can have. And some people will say, well, we could do this with a club, with like the biking club or something like that. And that may work for some people. There may not actually be any values or principles that are held to in some of those groups. And so you're bringing your kids, you're being a part of it, but you don't know what they're going to be exposed to those things because they're not coming together around values. They're coming together around an activity. And so then you can say, oh, well, like martial arts, there's values in martial arts, and maybe that can be the thing that you're coming together. And that's true, but they may not be the types of values that are important ultimately for, raising the kids. So it's just, I mean, for me, I think the Charlie Kirk assassination is a wake-up call, and it's really caused me to think a lot about what I want to do with my time and my life. And as much as I enjoy and get, you've noticed on my channel, I don't publish things as much anymore. And part of that is wanting to connect more with the people in my life here. But I think there's even something where when you look at, like, what are the young generations doing right now? If there's this whole dialogue about being bored, and that when we were young, we were bored. And so we went out and did stuff with people because we didn't have the internet to completely satiate our appetites of novelty and engagement. And by losing that motivator of connection, then people are not engaging with each other. So if you've got a group of really, fascinating, interesting friends, and you text each other all day and you get together on Thursday nights and you're chatting away, well, if that becomes the beginning and the end of your social engagement and your connection to other people, you are doing something that is not too far removed from the people who have programmed Grok or AI to be a personality, and then that's their boyfriend or that's their girlfriend.
This feels personal.
Okay. Well, no, I mean,
my heart's breaking.
Like,
what'd you say Thursdays?
We've been telling Chris he's great father material, but he doesn't have to go out and be bored and consider taking those steps because he can always hang out with the guys here. Well,
I need to Elon Musk it now at this point. I need to use,
I don't care what it is.
I need to use extratubular.
But the thing is, like,
I do it if there's some way to make that happen. But
there is a thing where we get fixated in this type of thing. But if I, instead of doing this stuff and making my videos and doing stuff, was engaged in some group that was centered around a local community, building something up in the real world, where when one of them got sick and got hurt, I could step in and help out, and vice versa. And where we could, I think that when people are talking about the loss of the sense of community and the connection to the real world that we're finding that serves in the direction of that dehumanization that we're lamenting has plagued our society, some of that is we got to own our own part in it and find a way to kind of step up to those important dimensions of what it means to be part of a community.
I know I'm chronically online, Jonathan. Thanks for
we've all met up, and if we meet up again, we should invite everybody out except for Rochester. We're staying in our bubble. Just kidding, Rochester. You can come and eat your burrito.
Can come too.
You can come, but you're only getting a burrito.
I thought about this.
Troy makes a good point if you want to highlight his comment about the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah, I saw it. Highlighted.
Yeah, I think, it's this weird thing where I view our modern discourse as a series of signals. And so the idea that we want to try to persuade Gen Z and Gen Alpha of the benefits of unplugging and engaging with community. Well, you have to have, right now, they're engaged with this internet discourse. So you've got to have some signal in the internet discourse that gives that motivation or that prompt. And so you need people in the discourse to tell people to unplug from the discourse. I don't know how it's going to happen.
So unfortunately, Steve put a damper on that. He said, as someone who still goes to church, it is still boring, guys.
Well, that's one of my problems. Like I've come up like a whole lot of times of like, is it the Mormon church that I gotta go back to and try to rescue my own and not let Kwaku define it?
I know.
But
so, to sort of,
but
I don't know.
At the same time too, every time I go down that road, I'm like, well, then I would be politically acting on it if I'm going in as a political actor. And secondly, that place alone, like I went last year for a month and it was hard for me. But.
So I guess some light pushback on Troy's thing is I'm actually Gen Z's probably fucked because I know us millennials are fucked. I think millennials and Gen Z are kind of in the same boat of being fucked, but I'm kind of optimistic for the next generation because people my age, myself included, the things you were talking about, Jonathan, like the things you would do differently, they're things that we see and that we are doing. Like we did, our oldest is 7. We want to be able to contact him when he's out playing because we want to give him, you read Jonathan Haidt and you're like, okay, we need to give him independence. He needs to go out on his own and stuff like that. And I'm way too paranoid to do it like that lady in New York who just let her kid ride the subway. I understand. Maybe she's right about that, but I'm not going to do it. And I live in a way safer place than New York. But so we got him a smartwatch. And it's just a little watch that he can call people that we've put into the watch. And he can text people with like pre-written messages and stuff like that. And we've already said, like, we're not doing smartphones. When our kids are older, we'll probably get them Gab phones or some equivalent to that. So they can call us and text us, and that's it. They are not doing social media because it destroys you. Because you're right. You're totally right to bring up the thinly veiled analogy that was just us. We spend all day, every day online doing stupid shit, and then we talk to the guys online on Thursday. I understand that I need to get out and touch grass, and social media has fucked my mind, and I need to just get off of it. It would have been easier if I had never gotten on it in the first place, so I want my kids to never get on it in the first place. So I think that a ton of people I'm talking to are doing exactly that for their kids. So I have some sort of optimism for Generation Alpha. I have to, because all 3 of my kids are Gen Alpha.
I don't know how to, myself, I'm probably just a bad case for it because all of the activities and activeness that I do is where I get too much online time. I have my earphones on and I'm walking a dog and I'm weightlifting and I'm practicing guitar and on all that sorts of stuff. And yeah, I should have like my relationship goes, but that's got a distance issue with it at the moment. And so hopefully that changes type deal. I'd love to have a kid, but I'd maybe need all of you to convince her. But yeah, I totally agree that this Charlie Kirk thing, there was a moment I was telling all you guys, there was a day that I was just like, I've never felt more ADD in my life. I have 25 videos open, all at 25%. And I know it was like a hot political moment or something like that. But I was definitely feeling it like, oh my gosh, this is not good. I am halfway down too many different rabbit holes all at the same time. And you start to see the thing of what Brett Weinstein and Heather Hane call like the Cartesian crisis, where you start looking at so much stuff that it gets harder to tell what's real and what isn't real. But there's the other level of it too, where then you come across people who don't know much about a thing and you see how quickly they're able to like hear like a short story of something that's wrong as well. Which I guess might lead to like the second thing of the speech issue, because the speech issue is coming up. But we saw the big news of the day: Jimmy Kimmel's canceled for. My parents might take in the world's news from Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert. So my parents, what they might know about this right now is Jimmy Kimmel got fired by Trump because a MAGA kid killed this Charlie Kirk guy who's a fascist. And
Troy, don't take the black pill. Troy said AI companions are likely to make things worse. AI psychosis is on the rise, which yes, it is. And then he said, Kirk's death kind of black-pilled me, I think. We are white pillars here.
Did you see that
not take the black pill?
Did anybody see in the
We're borderline Christ pill, okay?
The Luigi Mangione thing that he got exonerated? It's not
terrorism.
And one of the women outside of the courthouse said that she is in an AI relationship with him.
Oh Christ!
Yeah, I saw it.
And she's dead serious. She is dead serious.
This is a phenomenon that psychologists and psychiatrists are encountering, which is this AI psychosis, and it's the feedback confirmation engine that those AI things are is dangerous when you get people who are willing to blur the lines of reality and see these things as real. It's just the many varied ways that the human mind can go off the rails. It's going to happen.
Yeah, and more is going to happen. But the thing is, too, is I'm watching all of these different updates on what is real and what isn't real. And we're in a thread, so we're kind of like bouncing them off each other. And obviously, in the middle of that, you get some stuff like that Valadez guy came up or some sorts of things that aren't exactly right or aren't quite clear. And you kind of go through this process of being like, oh, that wasn't right. Oh, why did I even? And you feel stupid that you even looked at a thing that wasn't right. Like, well, but then you go back to it. But then you feel yourself going through this thing of like, now I'm watching Candace Owens say that these two were probably caught by the FBI for their underage pedo stuff, and the Jews did this and type stuff, and you start going like, oh my goodness. And just that stuff alone, just hearing all the different things, you start feeling crazy, even though you're doing pretty good at keeping up with what's the actual true story. You feel the nuttiness of the million different hypotheses coming at you from people who are all sorts of schizos themselves.
Yeah, I think that's where unplugging from this pseudo reality of the internet and reconnecting with real communities that are doing tangible things in the lives of each other and locally it's got to be a touchstone for a return to sanity. And it's the insanity that we've all been kind of bathed in. We got to find some way to do it. I'm going to try. A few years ago, I went to a Mormon trunk or treat, and it was a blast. And I saw all of these people having fun. They weren't talking about religious anything. They were eating hot dogs. I brought my chili because it was a chili cook-off, and I was a multi-year chili cook-off winner. And that's the one thing that I gave up when I left the church. I was like, oh. And so I brought it back, and I had this idea of doing Evil Apostate. It'd be like, hey, it's Evil Apostate. We're here seeing the Mormon in the Halloween. What a bunch of dopes and losers. And then like various clips of him just having a blast. And then at the end, I'd be like, I really miss this. This has been great. I want to go back just for the trunk or treats. And one day you're Mormon for trunk or treat. But it's like those community dimensions of the church are great. And those, like, I just think about that of any religion that is engaged with the community and finding ways for people to come together and connect is going to be positive. So, I've talked about in the past where there's this Lutheran church that has a community theater in the area, and I've been disengaged from that for a while, just as other things have happened in my life. But this whole thing with Charlie Kirk really made me want to try to actually connect with that community and put some sort of roots down. It doesn't necessarily have to be sitting in the pews or whatever, but just something where I'm engaged with something bigger than myself.
So it's maybe still online or something like that, but Risto has suggested we just did a book club. Marty and I, it was me, Marty, Kevin, and Risto. Was there anybody else in there? And we did Mere Christianity. And he just suggested that we do another book club of Brothers Karamazov.
Oh, hell yeah. I'm going to do that.
I want to, although that's a huge book.
What's that?
If I do your book club, are you going to help me move? If I get sick, are you going to...
Are you moving?
Yeah, he's talking about touching grass and being like a little bit closer to people.
I'm just like,
We also met Risto here when you're on there, but you're saying like get out and meet people like in the community. I played a band and
did you move up to Idaho? I will help you move. And we'll hang out.
I know you would.
I'll even learn. No, I'm saying you move up to Idaho. I will nerd out with you, and I will learn Yu-Gi-Oh. I will learn how to play Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
It's like it is. I mean, I hate to use it as a default because sometimes I feel like it's not enough, and sometimes I do wish like
But I know what you're saying.
A more religious community or something. But I do play in a band, and we played about 30 shows this summer, and we run around with all these other bands and help each other. And
no, I think that's a great example. Yeah, especially if you can trash talk them when you're online with us, because they're a bunch of wacky nut job Marxists. But
I will say one of the
they're good guys though. I mean, they're one of the reasons I know some of the Marxists are just kind of like they just kind of go with stuff they learn in here, but they're super sweeties beyond that. You know.
I will say that like one of the better sort of, I don't know, it's not like a conscious decision. Like me and Morgan never removed our names from the records of the church, right? And my reasoning was cringy, angry ex-Mormon stuff. I was like, no, I want him to excommunicate me. That's way more badass than removing your name. But then, like, I kind of calmed down, and I was like, you know what? I'm glad I didn't get my records removed because we moved. Like, I never really went to our ward in our old house, and then we moved on to the other side of town. And somehow they got our records over. I don't know who the hell sent our records over here, but someone did, and I wasn't bothered by it. You know, people like the ward started talking to us, and like I've never been to this ward, but we just had our baby, and they had like 4 women just like make us meals and bring them over. I don't know these ladies, but they're bringing me food. There's this guy who is, I think a lot of people would call him annoying, because he comes over, he knocks on our door every single Sunday, because in the summer, the ward puts on this thing called the Sunday stroll, where one ward member has like in their front yard, they put out a bunch of lawn chairs and they have some like appetizers and they just kind of talk. And we actually went to it like just once. We only went to it once because it happened to be 2 doors down and my kids really wanted to get out, and it was awesome. And I think that's the kind of thing that ex-Mormons complain about is this, you know, this really well-meaning guy that comes to my front door every single Sunday. And he even asked me one, he's like, hey, after we didn't come for like 10 weeks in a row, he's like, hey, do you want me to keep coming? I was like, hey, yeah, man, we appreciate the invite. But it's very endearing.
Well, the thing is, like, you know, there's that, what is it, Rumspringer or whatever, that some Mennonite or some sect.
Morgan has told me twice today in the chat that we need to become Amish.
You know, you send them out, they see the world, then they can come back and appreciate the thing. And to some extent, if you do return to the world of religion, whether it's Mormon or otherwise, you're coming back as a different. You're like the hobbits when they come back to the Shire. Yeah. And in some cases, we may be coming back to the scouring of the Shire if we see that the same demons that have infected the rest of the world are back there. But you come back armed with experience and knowledge, and all of that experience and knowledge is geared towards preserving the heart of what makes the Shire special, what makes it beautiful. And you may be in a position to have that armor and those swords in a way that the poor hobbits who were there the whole time did not. And it's you're different. They'll look at you different. You know, the hobbits that remain never looked at Merry and Pippin the same. They were taller than everybody else, and they, you know, it's different. I really like that metaphor.
Sorry. What's that? That's off the subject. Why did they grow again? I forgot why they grew.
They took it was in the books.
I remember, but
they drank something that made them.
Yeah, they drunk the drought in their encounter with Tom Bombadil, and the Ent drought was one of the things that they drank, and that was part of it. So I think that there's this thing about like the lesbian ant.
The refiner's fire of Mount Exmo Doom.
Yeah.
Where, the lesbian ant in the family is the one that everyone can be honest with, and they don't have to worry about, keeping up appearances with, because and that ant will just be totally real with them. And the times that I've engaged again with either my Mormon family or the church, they're not hateful. They don't kick me out. In some cases, they know that they can joke about things with me that they couldn't joke about with other people, or that I will say jokes that they can laugh at when they come from me that they can't laugh at. So, and there's a place that you could potentially exist in that realm, but you're not trying to go back and be a true believer if you're doing that. You're just trying to go back.
Do you think the church is at a place now where they would try less to?
I don't know.
Because I
think they try to convert you. If you like,
I think that too, and it might not have just been the church directly, but I told you about the situation where I dated the girl who was Mormon. I tried to work it out for a very long time, and I tried to consider just being a foyer Mormon type stuff, and maybe it was because marriage was so tied to it or something like that. But I really felt in that situation I was getting pressured to it's either in or out, and that might have been more the people around me, and I've never felt that way. It was maybe just because you got to do that for a temple marriage or something like that. But maybe if you're not trying to get a temple marriage, you could just go be a four-year Mormon.
This brings me back to like 2015 or whatever year it was when I'm watching the Thoughts on Things and stuff, talking about Henry B. Eyring and his manipulative crying. And I still really like that video. And then somebody comes and tells you, hey, in 10 years, this guy's going to tell you, go to Mormon church.
Did it really?
No, I'm just saying, like,
no, you're saying what if I thought you said you saw
somebody came and told me that. I'd be like, shut the fuck up. No, he won't. He wants to burn it down just like I do.
Well, but the thing is, though, like, knowing what you know, if you encounter that type of crying again, you'll see it for what it is. But I think even beyond that, if the problem with those videos is they're only looking at the manipulation. They're not looking at the value, and they're not looking at the positive part of it. And so I've had an idea to do something similar to that for conference and say, okay, we've done finding the problems. Now let's look at these conference talks and pull out the wisdom that is independent of divine claims that would be worthwhile actually talking about.
Okay, look at any Richard G. Scott talk where he talks about his late wife.
Yeah.
Those make me cry like a little bitch.
But the thing is, just like we were mentioned earlier, where, it's easy to criticize and find problems in the church, and then it's easy to go out and extol the virtues of not being in the church. But to be fair and balanced, you also want to talk about and understand the merits of what's being in the church and have some humility that there may be dimensions of that religious existence that you don't even realize are important. For example, like, I look at my kids that are of the age that I would have received all of these messages about finding a partner, starting a life, getting married, and I would be engaged very frequently with a bunch of peers who held similar values, who also wanted to do those things. So if you take your kids out of that pathway, then in the wider world out there, you're not going to find, first of all, your kids themselves have to consider family to be a value, and marriage to be a value, and the pursuit of those, and actually stepping out on a limb, not waiting till everything is in perfect order till you do that. Okay, so let's say that all that's in place. They understand, they want to start a family, they're looking for a relationship, and they're committed. Okay, that's fine. Now, what pool are they fishing in to try to find somebody that they can start that life with? Because the invisible benefit of the church is that there's a pool of people who have those same values, who want those same things. And so the chance that you can match those values and those life plans together is relatively high. But are you going to find that on Tinder? Are you going to find that on Hinge?
I found it in the Tinder of the Mormon world, which was BYU, Idaho. I dipped into the pool of Mormon girls, and it worked out pretty damn well, I would say.
Or no, but like, so when I think of my kids and if they get to the point where that becomes a value, they want to start a family. I mean, the fact that they haven't yet already is lamentable to me. I want to be a crusty grandpa already, but then even if they did decide that that was their primary value and their primary goal, the chance of finding somebody else who also has that primary goal, it's harder. And the numbers aren't as good. So that's a dimension of the church that me as a 30-year-old, Joseph Smith did this or that, and he's a bad guy. I'm not even realizing that there's a structure designed for the full measure of a life that includes the transition between generations that's built up around Joseph Smith.
Jonathan the iconoclast.
When you leave it, you don't realize how valuable it was that you lost. So then the question is, can you re-engage with something to recover that? And I think that there's something important for that. I don't know. Skeptic is asking some questions. I don't know if he wants to pop in or if he can pop in. It's always good to hear from him.
Mitchell asked, your kids want to join the church. Do you try to dissuade them? No. I don't want my kids to go on a mission because I hated my mission. But if they wanted to, I would support them for sure. Like if they wanted to join the church, I wouldn't dissuade them. I wouldn't even tell them why I left the church unless they asked me. But that was kind of the way I dealt with, I dealt with Morgan when I left the church. I didn't try to deconvert her. She came to me and asked me why I stopped, and I tried to be very level-headed, which is surprising because I was not level-headed online with Mormon shit.
I said it before, and I said it again. Just when I went with Kevin a year ago, I did maybe overly focus, or I say it back here, or maybe because it's funny, you just talk about like just getting bored in a sacrament meeting that's really kind of anodyne, but then noticing the time before and after the meeting when Kevin knows and talks to all his neighbors, and it blowing my mind away being 20 years out of it, and
you think back to your childhood home and you can name all the people that lived in all the houses.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's me. When I look at my parents just live on the other side of town, and some of the people have moved away, obviously, but I can look at every single house on the street I grew up on, and I can tell you who was there. I can tell you about their personality and stuff. I can't really do that now. The guy that lives 2 doors down, I can tell you that he's very persistent. That's about it, because he's the guy that comes over every Sunday to try to get me to go to the Sunday stroll. But that's about it. I could tell you that the next door neighbor is really nice because she always gives us extra zucchini from her garden. She's a very sweet old lady. But now thanks, Jonathan. Now you got Morgan wanting to be Mormon again. I'm not paying tithing, so fuck off with that.
Forrest said it, unfortunately it's all tied to fantastical truth claims, and then Troy brought up a later point, which has always been a bit of a paradox, but just seemingly a truth to me, is that I think the remarkable truth claims are part of what gives the belief its motivating power.
Well, it is, and if like seriously though, I think about this, I understand that like reality is a motivator. I understand that like I left the church because I don't believe in their truth claims, right? Like I don't think that Joseph Smith talked to an angel, and I feel like it's very difficult for me to stay in the Mormon church if I don't believe in those things, and I don't know that I want to believe those things. But then if I were to see 2 separate paths for my kid, like Lucas, my son Lucas, if I see Lucas going this direction and believing in all of the truth claims and having like a beautiful wife and giving several grandkids to us and just being happy his whole life, tithing, all of the shit, doing the entire Mormon shit, or going the other direction and listening to Natasha Helfer Parker, I would absolutely, unquestionably, not even hesitate to be like, yeah, believe in Joseph Smith. Like, I wouldn't even think about it for a half a second. Of course, I want the better outcome for you.
Well, the other thing too is that there's a bit of a selection process for us autistic. Things must be true, cannot accept truth. Things must be right, black or white, right or wrong, good. I was a good boy. I was a good Mormon boy. These have to be like, and I didn't masturbate till I was 18, Chris, and all these like
and a half.
Oh, like when I talk to my brothers that it's still in the church, they're not dogmatic about a lot of the church stuff. And they're
definitely
like,
the dogmatic people have the tougher time with
right. And so it's like, okay, so that means that if I could go back and just not be dogmatic, and just be like sort of like Jacob, where it's like, yeah, okay, this leader's saying a bunch of stuff in a dogmatic frame. That's nice for him. I don't have to shape my life according to that. Like, and the thing is, like, you can still do that. But I'm not worried. It's kind of like I have a little bit different feeling about it. It's not so much about Mormonism per se. I think that one mistake, and like the extreme the other way, is to assume all churches are equal. And so you could just go to a church and it's going to be the same as anything else. But it's more, there are still dangerous ideas, abusive ideas, and there are frameworks that are dangerous in religious paradigms. But you're a fool if you think that doesn't exist outside of the church. And that's the biggest sort of thing, is like coming to the realization that churches are terrible, but the stuff that's out there is actually in some cases far worse. And your little parallel with Natasha Helfer Parker versus Joseph Smith, and which of those you would want your kid to grow up modeling, is apt. But even skeptics comment about the churches are tied to ridiculous beliefs. Yeah, well, we've spent a lot of time talking about the ridiculous beliefs that will come and crawl into your kids' brains and inhabit them and totally transform them. And they're far less compatible with a peaceful, productive life. And beyond whether or not they're true or right, if they're going to compel your kid to be anxiety prone and paralyzed and not be able to grow up into a productive adult, like it's the trade-offs are abound.
And there's a bigger civilizational thing there too, which I was kind of getting at earlier, and it's an argument of the people on the right and even farther right, which I wish there was an answer for on the classical liberal side. But their question is can our nation really be centered around a group of legal ideas? Or does it need, just like the church and for the people to join each other and all that sorts of stuff, does it need a bigger unifying mythology around it, or historical, like Jebediah Smith, the Jebediah Springfield thing that we brought up before? But to use Zizek, sorry to go with a postmodern neo-Marxist, but one of the things that he's brought up before that I think is kind of a funny thing, of like the way autism doesn't do so well with connection, is he brings up the story of at the end of a date talking about going up for a cup of coffee, and that cup of coffee is a myth, but you can't just say, do you want to go for sexual relations now? And there's a lot of things in our society that extrapolate out from that we're going to go ahead and share a myth of the thing that we're talking about here to get a separate connection out of it, because maybe sports work that way, like a little bit, like sports are dads and sons and kids and brothers are able to kind of stand next to each other and talk about a sport better than they are about how you're doing today or something like that. But
maybe I don't know, maybe I need to just settle for the fact that nothing can be entirely true, like no belief system can have it all entirely right. Because I think of one of the main talking points that people are bringing up, something that Charlie Kirk said, was talking about they're trying to frame it as being sexist, telling women that being in the professional world is less desirable than being a parent or whatever. And I don't know. My rebuttal to that is always, I would give the same advice to men, because again, instead of my kid, you take me, you put me back in 2013 when I met my wife. Like, you tell me, okay, I'm going to let you be a Bitcoin billionaire. Now you're going to be all your needs are met. You don't have to do anything. You can be like completely, totally degenerate, just like you wanted to secretly at the time, but you didn't tell anyone. And you can fuck bitches and drink and smoke weed, do whatever the hell you want in a giant mansion and never have to work, never have to wake up to an alarm clock, anything like that. Or you can have your current standard of living with your wife and kids. Like that wouldn't even tempt me. Like I wouldn't even consider like being the Bitcoin billionaire philanderer. And so maybe like there's a lot, I'm sure there's a lot Charlie Kirk got wrong. I really didn't listen to him very much. There's some stuff I remember clowning on him about and stuff like that. But I do know for sure that is true. And that sounds like a testimony. And I guess it is. Like that thing is true.
Well, what I'd say, because when I consider the frame of mind that I would go back, it would be I'm not going to church. I'm not going back to church for the hour of boredom. No. Or the sitting in the back of the room. What I would be going for is to meet and know people in my community, to find ways to engage and connect with them. It would not be going to church for the hour. It'd be going to church to find the person that I can connect with and then set up some other thing, or to be known to this community and have them say, hey, we're doing something that's going to bring us together on Wednesday. You know, can you make it? It would be like for that dimension of it, the connections that exist, that coming together on Sunday is just it's kind of like seeing stuff like Steve says in the quote, you know, Streeter, if you were here, church would be a lot better, or something like that. Like, I feel the same way. Like, I would have no problem being the four-year Mormon if I could hang out with you guys in the foyer, and then we could set up doing something like, you know, whatever it was, like some way that we're coming together. And I think that's the thing, that as much as we enjoy this virtual parasocial thing that is the internet, you know, chances are if any of you went to your local ward, you just go to the foyer and you'll find your people.
Yeah. And there really is like a second civilizational worry about the whole entire thing too. The civilizations that are able to do this better and keep it together, like they will stay together and keep growing together. And it's seemingly most civilizations, it seems to have to go that way or be taken over by another that is willing to do that better. You know?
Mitchell says, good elders corn lesson, guys.
Basically, you go back and then you'll get excommunicated for warning about the liberation theology as it seeps into gospel doctrine. They'll be like, you're a little bit too problematic. And it's like, okay, fine.
Yeah. Or it says he doesn't know why atheist conservatism is off the table. I don't think it totally. I don't think it is either. I mean, obviously, it's the individual.
Well, it's a community aspect of it. Like, there's no atheist community that even remotely compares the Mormon community, especially where I live.
But I would throw a bone to it. But I've also thrown this bone to communists in the sense of we've never been in the tech era with a thing like that failing on a group level yet, and so maybe if we did really put our brains behind it in some sort of way, we could actually make a real community happen. I mean, I know John Lynn's been trying to do it, but I would actually say that one of the failures of that might actually be the politics of it, that why the Thrive stuff can't stick together. Maybe a conservative atheism could do it, but nobody's doing it.
No, they don't have supernatural beliefs. I'm almost convinced that you gotta have supernatural beliefs.
Yeah, well, or it's easier, like, for the conservative atheist to say, you know, I want to hang around people with the same values. They don't have to have the same beliefs, but if they have the same values, I can work with that. But you have to marry that with a degree of humility. I think if any of us go back, the thrill that we used to get out of pointing out problems, pointing out contradictions, you kind of have to put that away. Much in the same way that Lisa Simpson had to say Springfield is great.
Yeah.
And you don't have to lie, you don't have to betray yourself, but there is a muscle you can flex of trying to find the good.
We got to do Fred Flintstone's Buffalo Club. If you remember that.
Fred Flintstone, explain. That's a reference that I know there's a Fred Flintstone Buffalo Club, but what are you talking about?
Oh, they had like all the rituals and the songs and the dances and stuff. It almost kind of seemed like a frat type deal. And it was a men club. And actually, that's one of the things people talked about has gone away over the years, is people having men's clubs like that, where they, maybe you could call it like, what is it, the Masons or something, but not so intense as the Masons. But like in that frat world or some beer pool hall, they had songs that they sang together, and bowling together, and rituals that they did together, and maybe like medallions that they gave to each other type stuff, and that sort of deal. So there's a little bit more than just going and hanging out and talking about what sucks or something like that.
So what are the aspects of, since we know Mormonism, what are the aspects of Mormonism that if you went back, you'd have to like sit down with your kids and say, I know we're going, but this, we don't want to believe this?
I'd tell them, don't talk to the bishop if you've been jerking off.
If talking with the bishop is completely voluntary anyway. You just say, we're just not going to we're not going to talk with the bishop. It's not required.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing.
Like, I refuse to talk to the bishop. That was always allowed.
Well, it
Sorry,
was.
what Troy's saying here, I have to jump on. What Troy's saying here is, for about a decade, it looked like there's going to be a vibrant skeptic community, but then that got pushed. And I can say that was true. It seemed true to me too. Like I thought, like, oh, it's Star Trek. Star Trek's coming. But at the same time, maybe if it failed once, I mean, maybe they couldn't get it going again. I don't know that it had to. Like, it feels like a type of historicism to claim that it had to go that way. And I don't like that type of historicism, but maybe
I don't know. I think maybe it had to go that way.
Or fail a different way. But I'm sorry to cut off something else.
No, you're good. I would tell my kids, I don't know. Here's the issue with the bishop thing, though, is that like I never confess things to the bishop. And my mom recently stopped going to church, and she'll talk to me all about it and shit on the church, but she's still pretty, my mom. She's the same person. She's just no longer really Mormon. And I mentioned that I never went to the bishop, and she was like, good, you shouldn't have. And I said, I don't know. I feel like it would have absolved me of some guilt, And the thing is, I had pretty good bishops. Like I had bishops that would have been like, hey man, it's all right. We can get through this whole porn thing because it's the only thing that you're here for. I know it because you're a 15-year-old millennial. But I don't trust all bishops to be that way. I've heard the horror stories. I definitely agree with, that as far as I can tell, I agree with the Sam Young stance of, no, don't talk about your jerking off habits behind closed doors with a man that just one man. I don't know. I don't know what else I would tell them not to do. That's probably just about it. Like if they asked me, hey, should I go on a mission? I'd tell them I did not like my mission at all. I hated every second of it, in fact. But if you want to go, you can go. If you think, because it's almost like a faith thing at this point that I have to take people at their word that they actually liked their mission somehow. I don't know how you could like a mission, but there seemed to be a lot of people who did. And then a lot of them, I think, weren't lying about it. Did we lose Jonathan?
Do we?
Yeah, it looks like
he had to run.
I don't think so. He didn't say anything, but
he didn't.
He might have.
Maybe the internet went off or something.
You kicked him because he was trying to convince you to be a dad and rejoin.
We're not taking us. He's trying to tell me I might as well have been like some sort of a oppressive, whatever person telling me to go through. I don't know if his internet got cut off or something, or it didn't look like he was expecting that.
Yeah,
but
he would have said something. But
he's back. Your camera go off?
We can't hear you if you're talking.
Hello.
Casey asked if I would have them do baptisms for the dead when they were living. I'll tell you, man, this might sound weird, but honestly, baptisms for the dead is one of my few good memories from like Mormon ritual. I actually liked baptisms for the dead. It felt kind of, I didn't like doing, I did not like going to the temple for like endowment ceremonies and stuff like that, but I like baptisms for the dead. Forrest says, do you guys ever feel like this is the We Believe in Jesus club? You can't join if you don't believe in Jesus, go join another club.
Yeah, I mean a little bit.
Pretty much. I do think that like if I went to my ward and told them, hey, I want to attend weekly, I want to participate, but I really don't believe in any of your stuff, I think they would tell me, come anyway. And I do think they would spend every waking moment I do think it's been every waking moment with me trying to convince me of the Jesus stuff. And I also, I think, honestly, it's like the guy who comes to my house every Sunday. I think I would find that endearing. I'd be like, no, I don't think I can believe you shiz. But
I went through years of it trying to work it out, like with a gal, and I definitely things changed so much in the church, but I definitely felt pressured, like you're in or you're out, and I don't know if now they're trying to get better. I mean, and that's one of those things that they say is like a progression of any sort of religion. Like the Jews and the Catholic are much better at their foyer people and type stuff, and that they weren't at one time. You know, at one time they both probably fried people who weren't all in too. But who's to say that the Mormon is supposed to go with that? But maybe they lose something in that process too if they're not all fiery about it. But I definitely felt like it would be more respectful for me to just leave this here and not be coming in and doing that stuff at times. And I felt that some of me not going to church was some of me being respectful to them. I will leave this be. I will leave this to you.
So yeah, Starbase says you're still under covenant. Yeah, look, dude, I definitely, if I went to a church, I definitely wouldn't tell them that I got high on shrooms and showed all my friends the temple handshakes and clothes. Like I told them my temple name and shit like that. But I get that. My ward hasn't tried to convince me, but I'm in a YSA. I'm in a YSA ward. Dude, find yourself a hot, more mussy, and just
one of my
babies.
One of the weird things for me with the Mormon world is it's been so perfectly normally fine for all the rest of my family and extended family. You know, like they're all just in, have the kids, they're fine, and none of them have to think about it too hard, and they just go with it. You know,
I guess in this realm, I feel a lot like Gavin McInnes. You know, because I feel like he's one of the few people who never really changed. You know, because he's very like family man, very he is religious. Tells people to get married and have kids and stuff like that. But he also says, you know, cocaine's not that big of a deal. He just hasn't changed much. So I think, like, if I were to go to church, I definitely wouldn't change much. And if they asked me to, like, I guess I wouldn't be as crass at church as I am here. But damn, I would, at home, I would still act exactly like it. Well, because that's what I was in high school. The way I act right now is exactly how I acted in high school and on my mission, partially because I was a terrible missionary.
Yeah, I'm a little bit the same. Like I wasn't ever like great at small talk, so I just kind of would be honest with people and say how it was. Like I said, he wants to come back on. I talked to him just this last week, but my companion on my mission said I was a huge testimony builder for him because he knew how much I hated it. And I would talk about how much I hated it, but I still went balls out, like balls to the wall, like every single day type stuff. And yeah, what would I see? The thing is, like, whenever that question is asked or whenever I hear people talk about Mormons in the negative, I so frequently just go to my family and so many of my friends I grew around and what I would change or take away from any of them. And it's zero. Like it's zero that I would change any of them. And so if I had like 10 years ago when I was going through it with that gal, I thought about my kids thinking that I must be going to hell or something if I was in church and they were in church and I wasn't, type stuff. And it was a real big frustration to me at that time. But I don't know. I don't know that if I had kids going to a church like my siblings that I would feel like I would need to change or take some. I don't feel like I need to go tell my nephews to watch out for anything. I don't know, but they're so good at being the type of person, like Jonathan said, they're good at being the types who never were dogmatic about every little thing.
We all have religious autism, and we're assuming everybody has religious autism, but they don't.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Forrest said, I am much closer with my Exmo siblings. Do you have Exmo siblings?
No, I don't have any. I don't have any. Not in any of my extended family. I'm alone.
Really? I kind of liked being.
I have one cousin who's gay and did what you would want most gay people to do. Mormons. He vanished. He disappeared. Like I heard he went to some commune in France. So.
Forrest is telling on Jacob right now because Jacob's the only non-Exmo sibling. Anyway, I am. I don't know. I'm trying to think of my siblings because I've got 5 younger siblings. Only 2 of them are still active in the church. I'm the one I'm closest to is the younger brother right under me, and he is ex-Mormon. I don't think it's because he's ex-Mormon. I think it's just because he's my best friend growing up. Like we did everything together. I'm very close to all of my siblings. My brother that's still in the church, he came back from his mission, I don't know, like 5 years ago or something like that, and he was asking me about the movie Apocalypto. He's like, have you seen that? I was like, no, I haven't. Is that the one that's like about the Mayans? And he's like, yeah, that's the one. It's like about the layman. I kind of laughed a little bit at that, but he's a good guy. I am very close to all of my siblings, and I really don't think Mormonism has any influence. Because I named my recent kid, his middle name is Ryan, and that's after my brother that's right under me, who's like my best friend in the world. And I really think that if he were still very Mormon, it would be the exact same.
Forrest asks if there's any gay family members. I have a funny story, which I might have told on here before.
All of my brothers are gay.
My whole family, like all growing up, we talked about my grandparents got divorced when my parents were old already. And so all growing up, my grandma, who I didn't see very much, we heard that she had a roommate, Monsi from Spain, and all this sorts of type of stuff. And for a long, long time, I thought that she was just like a roommate and like worked as a housemaid and type of stuff like that. And growing up with all my Mormon and super Mormon family, at some point later, I heard that they were coming to town, but our BYU family was not going to let them sleep in the same bed when they came to the house. And I was like 20 something years old, and I was like, is grandma gay? Type stuff. And they're like, well, like they didn't want to say it or think about it. Like, I don't know that they even like came to that word on their own in their own minds and type of stuff. They didn't want to say anything about it. And
Forrest is telling us it changes the calculus a lot. Okay, I'm gonna say maybe you're a little bit biased in this because none of us have Mormon brothers who are like the most popular Mormon apologists. So that might change the calculus, I guess. But none of my brothers are Mormon apologists.
Well, also, I don't think that any of this discussion is saying that Mormonism is the community connection that you want, that you have to go to. It may be the most logical one for some people. And there are certainly other religious communities that aren't crazy and that they've existed for a long period of time and have good established.
But as far as saying, like, if his kids were raised into the Mormonism while he also has a gay sibling, does he want his kids learning or thinking that stuff?
I think I think he's looking at what it would mean for him to go and participate in an organization that is antagonistic towards people for being gay, and not wanting to endorse or positively be associated with any group like that. So, that's
Troy's hitting on a separate point that's very hard for me with the LDS Church too, as well. Just this week we were looking at that they put out like a new list of new speak words that you're supposed to say, like instead of member, less engaged and all, and that stuff seems like stuff that comes from like a McDonald's corporate type thing too. But yeah, the top how did Forrest just say? I'm not sure the LDS churches that we remember is still there anyway, but the people are like Kevin's people were still there. Like Kevin knows his neighborhood. He knows his whole neighborhood. I think I said hi to my neighbor a couple times, and I've got a bunch of other people around me I don't know from Adam, and sometimes I sit there and wonder, like, what am I missing? Like, we're talking about all these different things. I mentioned that lady who came and knew me when I was a kid, and I didn't even realize that I knew her, that she was watching me, but I feel like I don't have like any interactions with any little old ladies. And I should be having some interactions with some little old ladies. Like I played in a band, I was good enough. But where are the little old ladies that I know? I used to know a bunch of little old ladies. A bunch. A bunch of them. I knew them all by name. Last name, I guess.
Well, that's one of the tough things. My next door neighbor, the sweet old couple who are just so, like, they are so meticulous in maintaining their yard and making everything beautiful. The lady came over and just she's done this a few times. She brought us some vegetables from her garden, and she's this old lady, and her name is, my kids are like, "What's your name?" And she's like, "Marlene." And oh my God, they've asked me so many times over the last couple of weeks, when can we go to Marlene's house? Like, what do you mean go to Marlene's? We want to see her whole house, and we want to see her backyard, and we want to see her garden where she grew these vegetables. I was like, oh my God, Marlene is so much cooler than I am. Okay.
Yeah, and are there a bunch of little kids I could be tracking the same way that lady tracked me? Like, oh, did you hear this kid doing that? Oh, did you hear that kid's doing that? And I could be like some sort of little part of his life, just saying, "Good job, I heard you're on the football team," or something like that. And I don't know any except for my nephews who I just have a direct contact with.
Oh fuck, we got a fucking whore in the comments. Yeah, free Palestine, sure. Stop talking about it. I don't care.
What is that?
We all hate Jews, Mo Love. That's okay.
Is that real? Will we say the frill? That might just be a bot or something.
I probably block it or whatever, but whatever.
All right. Well, is there anything else from the week worth ruminating over or discussing?
Well, there was stuff on the free speech stuff that everybody got onto. Is like, is the right wing doing the cancel culture type stuff with the Jimmy Kimmel type deal, which might have been a subject to ponder or think about, or think if that's actually real.
Here's the ponderance on that. The ponderance on the Jimmy Kimmel situation is, I don't love, like, I understand that what the Trump admin is doing is totally like legal on the books. They can tell them, hey, as a big media organization, you have to be fair and balanced and that shit. Also, I think that's a stupid law. Like, I don't don't tell media companies what to do. Also, I don't fucking feel bad for Jimmy Kimmel. Like, there's not a single bone in my body that the dude that's out there saying like that people who didn't get the COVID shot should die, like, gets booted for shitting on Charlie Kirk. I don't care, man. Like, you should have been fired years ago for being terrible at your job anyway.
Yeah, the opening monologue of a comic at a stand-up, or at a nighttime show is as close to an editorial as you can get. And I don't know that anyone was assuming that it was not an editorial / opinion piece that is not a factual conveyance of stuff, and it was an opinion. I'm not, I don't think it's anything worth canceling over. But as you say, these people have been celebrating people who are their ideological opponents getting removed and deplatformed so much that it's hard to have much sympathy for them. A more dangerous thing there was a couple of things that happened, I think, because people will say, well, the MAGA is a cult. MAGA will just support anything that Trump will do. And I think the Pam Bondi thing certainly showed that is not the case.
There was crazy pushback.
Fuck Pam Bondi.
There was calls for everybody, even people who were calling on the Jimmy Kimmel thing. If you watch Aaron McIntyre, he actually technically started the grassroots move to go after Kimmel and that type of stuff, which I think all that is ultimately, it was an action taken by an employer over anything. But Aaron McIntyre spent the first half of that podcast saying fire Pam Bondi for bringing up the hate speech thing, like just fire her, she's out type stuff. But this is one of the things I was thinking about.
That dog wants to go out.
Yes, he does. He is ready. Like speech, people getting fired for their speech and all that sorts of stuff. No, Congress should pass no law about like fire. I'm an HR director. Do you know how many people I've fired for speech? Like I am the commissar, like for that. Like I have put down hundreds of doggies. I don't know how to say. I'm the vet who's euthanized more people in that than you could ever shake a stick at. And I was actually I got into an argument with Grok earlier about how is the Civil Rights Act of 1964 not a Congress shall pass no law infringing on speech, and it said, well, it's talking about conduct, not speech. And I was like, what? Like, aren't you just kind of playing with words? I was literally arguing with Grok, like, isn't that just like just switching one word out for the other word? It says, well, it has to be agreed upon by the common person that it is a slur or hateful or causes a hostile work environment. And I said, what's a common person anymore? Like we are getting to a level of people won't agree commonly upon what is actually like a slur or causes a hostile work environment. And he's like, oh, that's true. That is subjective, but I'm still not going to go on it. And the real ultimate truth of it is that we've had a law on the books for a long, long time that what you say at work is heavily regulated everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know. So I'm of two minds.
I lost Jonathan, you're muted.
You as an HR person is not an agent of the government, so it's all good.
So I'm of two minds.
But the government can act on us if I don't act. The government can fine us, can regulate us, can it's civil. It's not legal. We're not going to get put in jail, but they could fine us enough to put us out of business.
Yeah.
Fair
So
point.
I'm of two minds on the whole right-wing cancel culture thing, right? I like the Dave Smith take, which is basically yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I think everybody has kind of a threshold. It's not so much that we don't think people should ever be fired from their job for their views. It's more that like we don't think any of the things that you fucked people over for are worth fucking them over for. We don't think that like a 19-year-old woman should lose her scholarship and be expelled from her school because somebody found a resurfaced video of her saying the N-word while singing along to a rap song. Like that's absurd. But like once you're making light of a dude's death, first off, like if you're a school teacher, because a lot of these people are school teachers, absolutely fire the fuck out of you. Because if you're a school teacher, I know that this view that you have makes you I know your other views, and I know that you're an activist, and I know that I don't want my kid being taught by an activist because I know that you're not going to leave your activism at the door when you come into the school. So no, fuck off and get fired and go be a waitress or some shit like that. The other part is the Gavin McInnes take, which is he just flat out says, oh, you're calling me a hypocrite? Yeah, I'm being a hypocrite. Fuck you. Like, yeah, I'm saying that we should cancel you for your shitty. You did it forever. Like, you've done it for the last 10 years, and now you're bitching that we're
Well, you
playing
don't even
by
have
your
to
rules.
justify it. You just have to go back and pull one of the articles that was written back in the heyday of leftist cancellation, just detailing why it's a good thing. So you just put a link to that, and then say why are you
for
arguing
democracy. But there is issues with that FCC thing. That the FCC. I mean, like Jonathan said, a comedian's monologue. Although there is something strange that every single late night comedy thing has been basically Democratic propaganda. Like 10 different channels on the 10 different shows on the 3 different channels that just do that and spew that stuff every single night for 10 years. Starts to get to some sort of level of saying, like, if these are supposedly national channels that are regulated by the FCC and there's supposed to be some degree of public benefit or not causing public harm, and this where it comes to that issue of cause harm. I saw some people noting what the FCC could say to you about a statement like that. It says the rule prompts broadcast licensees permittees from broadcasting false information concerning a crime or a catastrophe if the licensee knows the information is false, if it is foreseeable that the broadcast of the information will cause substantial harm. There's that thing again. Cause harm. Does it cause harm? So they got to say causing harmy. So all this stuff, if you really kind of get into so many different laws, they're grounded in nothing. Like if you really tried to get into the grounding of like what is the grounding of what's offensive at work and how is that not an impingement on people's free speech? Broadcast of the information does in fact directly cause substantial public harm. It gives the tort twice, like just 2 in a row. The cause harm. It's knowingly false, cause harm. But I think that the FCC's regulating anything is a relic that should be done away with the past. But people were freaking out of this guy wrote the Project 2025, the guy who's currently in the FCC. He wrote what Project 2025. Well, if you go read Project 2025 on that, it says deregulate and get rid of the FCC. So it's like, okay, it says make it more fair, but just try to like get all this crap out of here, which is, well, I guess, really spooky 2025.
I think the other issue that people are willing to push back on MAGA is declaring Antifa a terrorist organization, because that is one of those things that is a concept that can be expanded without bounds since there's no official organization for it. And so there's a potential for an abuse of power as if the government takes upon itself to define Antifa on its own terms and then starts to broaden what that category is.
Yeah, it's always dangerous.
Yeah, that's always a danger. So I think that
I don't think they can even do that.
Willing to criticize that. That's an important part of the discourse right now. Anyway.
Yeah, and that's always been an important part of Trump, because Trump's kind of like a boomer. Like, he's not a lawyer or anything, and he'll just kind of blast stuff out, and then he gets like shut down or knocked down. But like, I listened to Andy No talk about the problems with the designating Antifa. You can't label domestic organizations that, and it's one of the reasons the Ku Klux Klan can still exist and that sort of stuff. So he probably won't be able to do it. He'd have to go after them with RICO laws, which does
well exactly. I mean, the parallel with organized crime, where it's like, how do you go after this nebulous organization that it's hard to prove what they do or anything, and that's where they're going to have to find some other way to pursue them. So it's interesting to see where people are following funding of NGOs that may have ended up as the fuel behind some of these organizations. And I think that may be a worthy place for them to go. So we'll see what shows up with that. It's always fun following Data Republican and seeing the different constellations take shape.
Guys,
you're going to come explain this to me, Mo Love? We were talking
Mo
about
Love
this
just
earlier. I know Andy knows not going to be somebody who you dare to talk about.
Mo Love just
explain it to us how it's not an organization.
The Antifa isn't an organization.
We know that they've decentralized since then because they've had people catch on to them, or they had a RICO charge against them in California where 11 or 12 of them did get in trouble for a RICO situation where they had gotten caught all together doing their black bloc crap. But beyond that, we know they're hiding, running that, and it gets kind of questionable about what's going on with this current crime that we're talking about, because one of the things they try to do is make sure that single people take falls for actions of many.
Okay.
We'd probably turn you because you don't like your opinion. Who's this?
I don't. Yeah, I don't know how to count shit, but her channel. I looked up her channel, and she's just reposting Hasanabe shit. So she's a fucking dipshit.
I didn't cry for your dear leader when he was murked by a Mormon. You are the baddie.
Yeah,
It's you, my love.
All right, I think I'm gonna have to wrap it up for my side of things.
Yeah, I gotta
wake
up. Crazy, and I'm just getting owned by this Mo Love who could explain so much to me, and I can't take it. It's so much knowledge.
Turn you in for what, jackass?
You are hallucinating an oppressive world that's not doing anything to you.
All right, you guys.
Yeah, I gotta wake up in
forward
4
to hearing
hours.
what community engagement and real life grass you've touched. Next time I see you, I'll try to have a report of my own too.
Yeah,
I'm gonna join an Antifa non-organization.
Well, you can look up the nearest Konami official store and go and learn how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a community that they meet at least 3 times a week with a bunch of young people. It's great.
I told you I'm only learning Yu-Gi-Oh! If you move to Idaho.
I'm not moving to Idaho. I'm firmly Texan.
In comparison to chess or something like that, how much time does it take to learn it?
Well, there's only how many, like 8 pieces in chess that you have to learn. There's over 10,000 Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
Holy Christ.
But that just means that every deck is a unique thing in and of itself. Anyway, don't get me proselytizing about Yu-Gi-Oh. It'll go on forever.
I'd have to start learning it, and I've got Mo Love who's going to be explaining Antifa to me, and I've got so much on my plate to learn about. So I guess
tune in next time, Mo Love. You can jump on the live stream and disillusion us.
Yeah.
Dipshit.
All right, Yu-Gi-Oh says bye.
All right,
bye. See you, Yu-Gi-Oh. See ya, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. Bye.
Later, virgins.